All right. Please take your seats. We are now about to start. Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Wow, I love the excitement, so much enthusiasm. This morning it was a lot easier. I was not even in the room and everyone was, and I thought, are they waiting for me? Is that what they're looking for? All right, welcome back from lunch. I hope everyone had the opportunity to enjoy great conversations, a little refueling, which I'm sure was much necessary. It's been a long day. And I hope you, again, had the opportunity to network with each other more importantly, and to start connecting with each other so you can follow up and stay in touch. Make the most of this opportunity, remember. Now, I want to help you get prepared for an afternoon of sessions. We have a fireside chat, we have a panel, we have another workshop session, which is going to be great to end the day, followed by a little celebration and a happy hour. And so I'm looking for everyone to keep their energy high all the way to the end, because I expect to see everyone at our little celebration. So here's what I'd like you to do for a moment. Close your eyes for one moment. Take a deep breath in, hold it, and breathe out. Keeping your eyes closed and breathing slowly, keep your eyes closed. I want you to think for a moment of your intention for this afternoon, and I want you to complete the sentence. My intention for this afternoon is to, and say this to yourself. Take a few seconds to think about what you want to accomplish this afternoon. We have speakers, we have a panel, we have workshops. Open your eyes. All right, I think you're ready for a very stimulating afternoon, and I want you to be prepared to get the most out of this. So what I would love to do now is to introduce our first fireside chat of the afternoon. And so this will be between Chris Milligan and Alona Kazantseva, and it will be focused on investing in people and human capital development. Alona Kazantseva is the content co-lead for the Youth Summit Committee, and she works for the World Bank Global RAS Delivery Unit. Chris Milligan is the counselor to the agency at USAID. As a member of the Senior Foreign Service, he has a deep wealth of development experience, having led and contributed to high-priority initiatives throughout his USAID career. Mr. Milligan has a bachelor's degree from Georgetown's School of Foreign Service, a master's degree from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, and a distinguished graduate of the National War College. Please help me welcome to the stage Chris and Alona.
So good afternoon to everybody. Thank you all for coming and joining us today. We welcome you during the World Bank Group Youth Summit 2017. I think that before we start our conversation, I just want to remind the audience that the main purpose and the main idea of such fireside conversations is to inspire people who are here today in this room, as well as people who are watching live stream, with some new ideas and with some new perspectives about things that we're all working with around human capital. So I think that I'm the luckiest person today for sure, because I'm sitting right next to you and I will have incredible opportunity to ask all the questions that I have in person. But I will definitely encourage our audience to think about the question that you may have to Chris, as we will definitely open the floor to participants for your questions. So thank you so much, Chris, for coming. It's a great honor and a great pleasure for me to welcome you here today at this stage. And my first question will be regarding the USAID activities. So administrator of USAID, Mark Green, he stated that the ultimate goal of development assistance must be to work toward the day when it's no longer necessary. At the heart of USAID work is a core belief that each country must lead its own development journey to self-reliance. So Administrator Mark Green talks a lot how to support journey to self-reliance and how to invest in capacity around human capital development. How does it relate to young and emerging leaders? And what is the role of leaders in this process?
Thank you, Alona. And I have to say, I am just thrilled to be here. I've always heard about these incredible youth summits that the World Bank Group has. I am so happy to be here today and to be participating in part of one. Alona's right. Our administrator has challenged us with the idea that the purpose of foreign assistance should be to end the need for foreign assistance. And I have to say that our administrator himself was a youth leader and volunteered in Kenya. And actually, besides teaching English, contracted malaria and has a deep understanding of the challenges that many countries have. But so, if the purpose of foreign assistance is to end the need for assistance, it's about countries becoming more self-reliant, countries being able to plan and to finance and implement solutions to their development challenges. And when we say country, we don't just mean government. Civil society, private sector, universities, we also mean youth. You've heard this before, that youth are a significant percentage of every country's population, but 100% of the future. And so youth are critical to this journey towards self-reliance. Now, when we look at self-reliance, we divide it into two areas: the commitment of a country and the capacity of a country. And what we've done is we've taken 17 independent metrics that are publicly available, and we've mapped the journey of self-reliance out for every low-income and middle-income country. And you can go online and see what that looks like. So, besides the fact that youth are the drivers of change, that youth are a critical component to the self-reliance, that no country can achieve self-reliance leaving youth behind. Besides that, if I were in this room today, I'd go and look at USAID's website under self-reliance and find out where my country is. Now, this journey, these metrics that are used, they're not definitive, but they're informative. And so you can go on there and look, and then you can engage in a conversation with your peers, with others, with leaders and communities in your country to say, if we are on a journey to self-reliance, what do we need to do in our commitment and our capacity to get there? So I would learn, I would engage, and then I would innovate. I've heard about some of the many great ideas and solutions that are here existing in this audience. And there must be so many different ways of participating in of achieving self-reliance in the communities where you live and even at a national scale.
Thank you, Chris. You know that today, before our fireside chat, we talked a lot about young people and the role of young people in changing the world. You know, we're super excited that USAID has helped support the creation of Youth Lead platform, which aims at connecting young change makers globally. It's a great honor for us and a great pleasure that today Y2Y as a World Bank will join and will become a partner today during its official launch. So can you tell us more about this platform and how it connects young change makers all around the world?
Thank you, Ilona. We are pleased to formally launch youthlead.org here today at this important summit. As I said, youth are critical in the journey of self-reliance. No country will achieve self-reliance without the contributions of their youth. So we want to support them. We want to support youth and to achieve, to realize their ideas And what we've done is, working with our partners, we've come up with youthlead.org. What is that? YouthLead is a virtual collaborative marketplace where youth can come and meet their peers and learn about ideas, join discussions, what works, what doesn't work. They can also learn about the latest funding availability out there, funding possibilities, whether it could be scholarships or grant funding or funding to attend international travel events. And finally, youth can find peers and coaches online. So this is this collaborative virtual marketplace. And it wasn't just an idea that people at USAID came up with. No, we listened to our youth advisory committee of 100 youth, international youth. And we put a lot of their thoughts into this. They told us, we don't want to click on a website. We want the information pushed out to us on social media. So we listened and we did that. And then we have a lot of partners who supported us, and you'll see a slide with their names. And some are with us today. We have Christian Lord from IRIX. We have Tim Norse from Making Sense International, and Susan Riley from the International Youth Foundation. So we have had a lot of support to get us here. So I challenge everyone in this room, go to the display out there and look at this and sign up. Get connected, get inspired, get smarter, and get funded. Because at USAID, we believe in the power of youth connectivity to solve these development problems.
Thank you, Chris. I think that after such an amazing and inspiring conversation, I will be the first person who will join this platform right after our fireside chat. You know, working at the World Bank, we all understand how important it is to ensure that such huge development organizations like World Bank and USAID are youth-friendly. So based on your experience, how do you see how can development organizations ensure that they're youth-friendly and ensure that they understand what are the unique needs of young people in different contexts?
That's a great question. I've worked at USAID for 28, 29 years. And we've undergone a lot of changes in becoming more youth-friendly. And it's something we have to continue to work at. But some of my thoughts would be this. I think that organizations need to move beyond seeing youth as a beneficiary group. They need to have not an ad hoc approach, but have authentic engagement. And they need to incorporate youth into their processes. One example I can think of is in Guatemala. We have a USAID mission there, and it brought in indigenous youth leaders from the highlands to sit and work next to our staff on developing solutions to the problems up in the highlands. It wasn't just going and having a stakeholders meeting, checking the box, and moving on. That's not meaningful. That's not meaningful youth engagement. It's not authentic. So organizations like USAID and others had the challenge of incorporating youth into our processes, right? And that is a challenge. And we're still finding more and better ways of doing it. Another thing is that it's learning. It's finding those ways and repeating them. Let's face it, not everyone is convinced about the role of youth in development. There are still skeptics out there. You meet them every day, right? We need to learn more, to point to examples of what has worked and what hasn't worked. So we have the evidence to take on the skeptics and point to these real solutions where together you have made a difference. And we also need to do that to help those who are struggling with, how do I do this? Many organizations want to engage youth. Many organizations, they get it. They don't need to be convinced. They don't know how. So people running organizations, they're getting 1,000 different priorities every day. They don't have a lot of time. And they think, youth, I want to do it. It's just one more thing. I don't know. So a continuous learning process helps every organization, not only in dismissing the skeptics and convincing them to jump on board, but also in sharing what works and what doesn't work and helping those who have the right intentions. Finally, one thing we did at USAID is we developed a youth and development policy in 2012. And then we made structural changes in our organization. We appointed a youth coordinator. We have a senior champion group on youth that comes together. There's a working level youth corps, and there's a youth point of contact in all our missions. So we have a network inside USAID on these issues. And then we help that network with training by professionalizing the discipline, if you will, of looking at how youth can play a role in development, and bringing resources so that our USAID missions had help in designing solutions with youth and implementing them. So for us, being youth-friendly meant actually authentic engagement, building youth into the processes. It meant continuous learning, and it meant making some structural changes and putting resources behind them.
You know, I have hundreds of questions that I would like to ask you, but we're super limited in time, and I think that it's time to open the floor to the audience, as I do believe that they have even more questions that I have. So, dear all, the floor is yours. We can take some of the questions from the audience. Please come to the mics, and we will definitely take a few questions.
Hi. My name is Crystal Poo. I'm a junior at Boston College and also an intern in Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker's budget office, working on state operating and capital budget and under the Secretary of Finance. So what I've been noticing from my very limited work experience is that just throwing money at a problem doesn't necessarily help to solve it. So I was wondering, what's your take from that? Like how to solve the problem with very limited capital, how to best put up, how to make the most use of the money we have and solve the most problems that exist.
Yeah. Thank you. That's an excellent question. And you're absolutely right. It's not about throwing money at a problem. In fact, a lot of solutions I've seen is creating a platform where youth can come together and then getting out of the way. So, for example, in Burma, we worked with a local NGO and we sponsored a hackathon, right? Where the youth of Burma and Myanmar came together and they crowdsourced solutions to fighting hate speech, to improving health outcomes through social messaging, for delivering humanitarian assistance more effectively. So it's really, I think it's, as you said rightly, not about the money, but creating the opportunity. The other thing is creating those linkages so that the mistakes aren't just repeated, that people are learning from each other and inspiring each other. I think that a development solution, if it's done in isolation and if it's about just the money, then not only will it be not successful, it might actually make things worse. So being strategic, which means designing the engagement of youth early in the process, and then thinking about what it is to actually encourage that initiative and entrepreneurship, and then just getting out of the way, but being supportive is probably the right approach.
Hi, my name is Blessing Douglas. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm actually a graduate student at GW. So my question is about accountability and sustainability, especially in regions where there are a lot of barriers. Coming from Nigeria and having schooled in the Northeast, I've been privileged to work on projects being sponsored by the USAID, such as Technology Enhanced Learning. And the gender parity I saw in the project was actually mind-blowing. And at the same time, I'm trying to see, how do you deal with barriers like culture and religion that hinder the development of certain groups like the girl child? So how do you manage that to ensure that there's inclusivity and making sure that there is a balance?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I'm sure there's many people here who have some experience with that and thoughts. I want to start with the issue of accountability. And from a donor perspective, we're cognizant of that. We want to make sure that when we engage with local institutions, that they maintain their accountability to the people they work with. Many times we've seen situations where a donor comes in with a lot of resources, and all of a sudden the accountability flips. It becomes upward accountability to USAID at the expense of accountability downward. So when I hear of accountability, it's not only accountability I have for the use of taxpayers' funds and accountability to show results, but I want to make sure that my institution is enforcing that is reinforcing that accountability that locals and local institutions have for their communities. We also realize that there isn't one size that fits all. We live in a very complex world, and that's why we have to engage and listen. And going back to something I said earlier, that listening and engagement at the local level has to be built into the process. We also want to, moving forward, to look more at co-designing initiatives and co-implementing so that we make sure that we build in the right accountability early on.
Yeah, sorry, I think that we have just time for 2 last questions. So I see 2 speakers, so thank you so much. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Prabhat. I run a sports nonprofit in rural India to help tribal girls to compete in sports. And we also have an agricultural business. So my question is on what do you think about social impact investing, and especially when it comes to USAID and OPIC investment, and how it could be kind of useful for new startups like mine who are working around agriculture, and we were thinking about starting a social impact fund for farmers, so on that sector.
No, it's this social impact investing is very innovative, and thank you for what you're doing. There are, as a development institution, we have to innovate and we have to look at new ways of doing things. And we actually have a fund that you can apply to called Development Innovation Ventures. If you have a good idea, like social impact investing and others, we want to know about it and we want to help you. And so if you were to apply for support through our Development Innovation Ventures, we would help you with funding to take it to scale if it had a good proof of concept. So yes, there is so much more out there than just beyond the traditional development tools. Moving forward, we need to work not only with new tools, but with new partners, and many of them are this generation of youth in the world.
So time for the last question.
Hi, my name is Kayla. I'm from the island of Barbados in the Caribbean. I wanted to ask, what advice do you give to organizations based in small island developing states that often suffer from visibility issues as well as are limited in their resources for funding, access to funding, as well as the fact that our current economic climate is a bit bleak?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. My first advice is don't wait for us. Don't wait for USAID. You guys are moving so fast with so many ideas. What you need to do is continue to reach out more. We know that overseas, 9 out of 10 jobs are being created by the private sector. And we also know the private sector itself is changing. I've heard about the great work by the MasterCard Foundation, by Hilton and Marriott and others. We've partnered with many private sector organizations as well. But so there are countries that are less prominent, but there are opportunities there. One of the things I would go to is I'd go back to the youthlead.org and pose that question to your peers and find out what their solutions are. Because we are less and less isolated in this world as we go forward. And so even countries that may not be in the news every day have countless opportunities. So I would use all your initiative to engage with a broad set of partners out there, and I think you'll be successful. And I would just like to close with one thought. I think that when I look at this room, I think of myself, and I think about the question about accountability that came up. You know, we should be accountable to those who are not in this room, and not just the ones who are listening, but as we know, there are 1.8 billion youth in this world, and more and more of them are living in marginalized and vulnerable communities. Maybe they won't even be able to access Youth Lead, but you can. And so we have a responsibility because we're here. We have a responsibility for those who are not here in this room, who haven't had these opportunities. So I just would like to leave you with that thought.
Thank you, Chris, for such inspiring conversation. And I have just like one idea, as I'm going to create profile on Youth Lead right after our chat. I need to take a profile picture for my profile. So if you don't mind, let's go and join the audience. Please take your seats, and we will take a huge, nice picture with all of you to end up our fireside chat. What do you think about this?
Thank you again, Chris and Alona. Appreciate that. I would now like to introduce our next fireside chat on the Human Capital Project. Joining us for the conversation will be Annette Dixon, the Vice President for Human Development at the World Bank, and one of our Youth Summit co-chairs, Fanny Delavelle, who is, again, Manager and co-chair of the Youth Summit Committee. Please help me welcome both of them to the stage. Hi there, thank you.
Hello again, everyone. All right, I hope you're enjoying these first sessions of the World Bank Youth Summit and that you've had the opportunity to deliver on some of these 3 challenges that I gave you this morning. It is my great pleasure to be here with Annette Dixon. Annette is the Vice President for Human Development at the World Bank Group. In that capacity, she oversees the global practices for education, health, nutrition, and population, gender, social protection, and jobs. Previously, she was the World Bank Vice President for the South Asia region, where she was overseeing operations and projects worth more than $10 billion per year. Throughout her career at the World Bank, Annette has championed initiatives aimed at increasing human potential, from supporting the launch of a helpline for survivors of gender-based violence in Nepal to increasing opportunity in Afghanistan during times of economic uncertainty. Prior to joining the World Bank in 1999, Annette was working for the government of New Zealand as Chief Executive of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Youth Affairs.
Of Youth Affairs. I'm sorry, all right,
Yeah,
Youth
very
Affairs.
relevant.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Annette, for joining us for this fireside chat. I have 2 questions to start this conversation with you. The first one is, human capital has become a bit of a buzzword recently, but you were already working on human development in Europe and Central Asia when you first joined the bank. So hasn't human capital always been important? And can you tell us a little bit, building on your experience working on building human capital in different countries, in different regions, about the link between human capital and poverty, and why it has become so important for the World Bank Group?
Well, thanks very much. And actually, even going back further, I started my professional life actually as a youth worker. And my first job in development was as a youth development worker, which is kind of why this whole summit is actually so exciting, because I think it's really, I think, emblematic of why it's, and the Human Capital Project itself is something that young people care deeply about. So, of course, human development or human capital has always been important. The simple answer, it's even more important than ever. Now, we know that, and we really just, the evidence has been keeping up is just catching up with what we've always known, that investing in good health and good education is morally the right thing to do. What we have is a much clearer evidential line of sight, if you like, that if you invest in good health and education outcomes, it will help countries to develop. And that's because people are more productive, they can contribute more, and that helps countries to get richer, and getting richer actually reduces poverty. So it's really just that's important. But actually how important it is something that we now know. We've just produced, about a year ago, a report called The Wealth of Nations. And for the first time ever, we measured human capital as part of total wealth. So you know, and if those of you who have studied economics, we know that physical capital is been measured for a long, long time. In the last couple of decades, we've started measuring natural capital, so the endowments in the natural environment and land and forests and so on. And now we've added an accounting of human capital. And really what it really shows is just how important it is. So across the world, there is a huge difference between developed and developing countries. So in the developed, advanced world, if you like, human capital accounts for 70% of wealth, which is a huge amount. And those are the countries that do have the best investment or the biggest investment in infrastructure as well. But even so, human capital accounts for 70%. Whereas in developing countries, it's about 41%. So it makes up a huge difference in the gap between developed and developing countries. Now, we know individually that some of the things that are important in human development, if we invest in them, it improves the productivity of a country. So, for example, we care a lot at the bank about stunting. And stunting is a technical term, sounds awful, and it's really a measure of height for age of young kids. And it's important because it's a proxy for something that's even more important, which is the development of the young child, and particularly the brain development, because the brain development a lot of it takes place when the child is still in the mother's uterus, and if a child is born stunted, then it actually has affected their brain development. And so we've started really paying a lot of attention to this measure, because in developing countries, quite large numbers of kids are not actually fully developed to their full potential as they might otherwise be. So we know, for example, an average country would have 7% more GDP per head of population today if they eliminated stunting. So it's just hugely important. It's obviously important for the life chances of an individual child, but when you aggregate it, it's something that makes a powerful difference in the overall country. So I said it's even more important, and that gets to the next part of the story, which is what's happening in the world. And that's, of course, technology is actually changing the world dramatically, and it's changing the nature of jobs and work. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether technology reduces jobs that are available for people, or whether it actually creates new jobs. And actually, we think it's a mixture of all of the above. So some jobs, a relatively small number of jobs, totally disappear when technology comes in. Some new jobs are created that didn't exist before, but a lot of jobs are made more complex because technology adds to the complexity of the work that's done. It allows people to do even more. And so that adds up to a need for even better human capital. It's obvious that no matter what, people need to be even better educated, healthier, in order to be productive in the world of the future.
Right, now that's very interesting. And one innovation that the World Bank Group has come up with is the Human Capital Index. We actually did a Facebook poll before the Youth Summit started with our audience here as well as online. And the Human Capital Index was one of the key topics that our audience wanted to learn more about. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Human Capital Index? What does it measure? How does it work? And were there any trends or lessons that actually surprised you?
Yeah, well, hands up those who have actually looked at this. Looked at it online, yeah. So one of the cool things you can do, you can look up whatever, there's 157 countries included in the index. So about 30 countries missed out. So for most of you, you'll be able to look up and see what the Human Capital Index says about your own particular country. And what we've done is we've actually put together an index that measures those human development outcomes that we know have a really important link to productivity and growth. So it's not everything that we know is important in human development, but those things that we have a strong evidential link, and those things that we have a lot of data across countries. So everything that's in the index we know is important, but not everything that's important is in the index. So that's just something to bear in mind. Now, the index considers three things. Firstly, survival. Will a child born today live long enough to begin school? And that's, will kids survive till 5 years old? How much schooling will that child complete? And most importantly, what will they learn? What are the learning years that they will actually leave school with? And will they leave school in good health, ready for further learning, and able to work fully as a productive adult? And that's the probability that a 15-year-old kid will survive to age 60. So the index actually is really interesting because it's gender disaggregated. And some of these things that are in this index are things we've known about for a long time. But there's one thing that's really new and important, and this is this new metric for figuring out not just how many years of enrollment kids have in a country, but how much years of learning do they leave with. And that gives us a number which we're calling the learning gap. Now, what we did is this index essentially measures between 0 and 1, and 1 is the full potential of health and education that a child could have. And then we rank the countries according to this. So we have countries from 157 to 1. Now, one thing that's important is no country got to 1. The highest country is at 0.88, and that's Singapore. And it's interesting because even Singapore is investing more in better health and education for their young people. They're doing more in early childhood, and they're doing more in post-school learning. So that's important. There's something in this index for every country. There's no country that is there because, as I said, the bar is rising on all countries. They have to make sure that their kids are even healthier and better educated. Now, what we're trying to do is to get countries to actually look at not just how much they're investing in the human capital outcomes of their population, but how effective is it? And so that's why the metric like this learning gap is really important, because a country could invest anything up to 14 years, but only be getting 12 or 11 years of learning outcomes. So a lot of it is actually helping countries to actually work out whether they're actually effective enough in the outcomes that they're getting, even for the money that they're spending. So what did we learn from this? Well, one thing I think is that in all of these rankings that we see in human development, one thing that's really important is that countries that do really well on these indices are countries that have very high equity of outcomes. They don't have a lot of young people left behind who are not actually benefiting. So they actually spend a lot of time basically getting everybody to come along. So if kids for example, have been in school for a couple of years and are still not reading, they get a lot of remedial help to get them on their way. So that's really important. Second thing is that this is not something that you just fix overnight. Countries that actually do well pay a lot of attention to this over successive decades. And even during tough times, they continue to invest in better health services and better education. And there's some quite interesting and important cases around the world where countries have actually made this a priority over successive political cycles, and in good times and in not so good times, that has really made the difference. And Singapore itself is an example of a country that has done that. Thirdly, a lot of what goes on in a country is actually, varies across the country. So there are regional differences. There may be differences which are driven by other disparities or inequities that are in the society. And so it's really important that countries look not just at their national data, but they look at the subnational level to look at differences across states or provinces or regions, that they look at differences for different ethnic groups and so on. Lesson number 4 is this is something that takes a whole of government approach. You don't get good health and education outcomes just by paying attention to health and education services. There's lots of other things that are really important for this. So for example, we know that for poor families, if they don't have access to social safety nets, they have no capacity to deal with shocks. So if there's a drought or flood and their crops are wiped out, if they don't have access to safety nets, then that impacts immediately on the family's well-being. So there are a lot of things, water, sanitation, infrastructure, roads, accessing, if a kid has to walk more than 5 kilometers to school, are they actually going to go to school every day? Because it just is so exhausting for the kid. So there is a lot that goes into making these results come about. And then the last thing that's really important are the demographic trends in a country. Because we know that countries that have done really well in terms of growing their way out of poverty, if you think about, the classic examples are a lot of the East Asian countries. They did well by hitting, for those of you who come from cricket-playing countries, what we call the sweet spot. And you hit the sweet spot in these demographic transitions when you invest more in human development outcomes, you have better health and education of your population, and you bring the population growth down. And this is important because a lot of countries have very high fertility rates, and they can't grow the economy fast enough to actually improve the living standards. So you get these demographic transitions when you get the population growth coming down. And this is important because no country's actually had one of these demographic dividends or demographic transitions, as we call them, with a fertility rate of higher than 4, an average of 4 live children per woman. And we have a lot of countries in the world that still have very high fertility rates, much higher than that. So it's going to be really important for that to be improved, as well as improving the health and education outcomes, so you get to this sweet spot.
These are really impactful lessons for governments worldwide. And I wonder, which among these ingredients are, in your opinion, the key ingredients for governments to increase the human potential of their population? And how are you and the World Bank helping those countries to make sure that they are making more and better investments in human capital?
Well, I think one thing, just by doing the index, we're actually making the data available to all of you. And that actually is a really important part of this, because, governments are often very focused on the political cycle. And as I said, this is something that actually governments need to keep doing, and they need to, it's urgent and important, but usually it's not as urgent as other things seem to be, or the results don't come as quickly as other things that they can do. So just by making the data available, we really hope that we will give you a lot of information that will actually enable you to engage in an informed public policy discussion in your countries. I think the second thing is that's really important is actually getting value for money from what countries are doing. As I said, you know, it's not about the absolute level of money, it's about how good the results are with the money that you have. And you don't know that unless you are measuring constantly what the results are and getting that feedback loop. So that's really, really important. So I actually think a lot of it comes from actually making sure, you know, I mean, one of the things I've sort of come to the conclusion that from this discussion about the index and our engagement with policymakers is that they know intuitively that this is important. But what they don't have is a good sense of how well they're doing. So you guys can actually get out there and actually engage with countries and look at where countries can make improvements. I mentioned earlier that the data is gender disaggregated, and that's a really important part of the conversation as well, is who's not doing so well and why is it important for the society for those results to be improved for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned earlier the importance of getting that information out for the wider audience and youth to actually have an impact as well on improving human capital in their countries. And it so happens at the Youth Summit, we organize a competition in which we encourage young entrepreneurs from all around the world to submit ideas on human potential and how they can increase it in their countries or in their communities. And you talked about a little bit about technology earlier, and a lot of our finalists' proposals actually are technology-based solutions. So for instance, we have a platform which uses blockchain to help refugees. We have an automated system that encourages immunization in Africa. I am curious to hear what is your view on the best ways we can harness technology to increase human capital?
Well, I think technology is part of what's driving the complexity in the world, which is actually creating more demand for better human capital. So that it helps firstly at the aggregate level in that sense, because it is actually really bringing this discussion back to the sort of top of everybody's minds. And it's our job to keep it there as well. So that's the first part. But more directly, I think there's a lot that countries can do by using technology cleverly, and that's because there's in a lot of countries, services don't work very well for people, and we know from the data that we have that. So, for example, health and education services, there's some pretty serious gaps in coverage. Still, and even more, we're learning a lot more about the quality, the mixed quality of a lot of the services that people are getting, and particularly in middle income and low income countries. Not exclusively, some countries do a lot better than others, and some have improved much faster. But we know, for example, that in developing countries, after 4 years of education, 60% of the kids can't read a full paragraph or solve a simple math problem. So that's pretty damning. And it's, in some ways, it's not a surprise, because we know that firstly there's weak capacity in a lot of countries, so that the teachers are themselves the products of a poor education system, so they're struggling even before they've started learning to teach in terms of their own education levels. Similarly, we see some, we undertake surveys in health services. And in some of the countries we've surveyed, in 7 countries, half the patients presenting with the 5 most common conditions were misdiagnosed. So you have a 50% chance of getting a correct diagnosis and hence correct treatment. So a lot of policymakers are actually looking for solutions that will help these challenged health workers or teachers to actually be able to deliver better services quickly. And technology may be able to help here. So I think the more that we have of testing, generating ideas, but testing them in developing countries where resources are constrained, to find those which can actually be taken to scale are really important. But there are also, so those are the capacity challenges, but there are also governance challenges. So for example, there's a lot of places where teachers don't necessarily show up, and if teachers don't show up, the kids don't come to school. It's, you know, it sort of follows. And so simple use of cell phone technology, in some of the countries, we're financing monitoring of teacher attendance using cell phones. And so first thing we found in one place that in one province of a particular country, 4,000 teachers had actually migrated, but were still drawing a salary. So they actually had migrated to the Gulf and were still drawing a salary. So there's a savings there. So that's a way of actually improving effectiveness. Secondly, when you started monitoring teacher attendance, the teacher attendance improved significantly, but more importantly, the kids' attendance actually improved even more. So it just, simple technology can actually really help to reduce some of the most challenging problems that you have. There are some, I think, tremendous development successes using new technologies. So, for example, in India, who's here from India? Okay, you know, you've got your Aadhaar card, which is an identification card. This was a biometric identification that has actually been developed in India, which has actually been able to be scaled up across many other developing countries in the world. And this enables services to be delivered, people to access benefits. It can help to reduce fraud in government services. And this is, it's helped to improve financial inclusion in countries. So this is actually a tremendous success and development of something that was started in one country that's actually been able to be scaled up in dozens of social programs around the world. And there's some other tremendous examples of that. You know, more and more, even in very conflict-ridden situations, it's possible for the bank to finance programs that deliver to people using electronic means. So we can get social safety nets in place for people who are in the most challenging situations because of technology, where we couldn't have done it previously.
And we actually have quite a few people in this room who are developing technology-based solutions or have ideas on projects to build on human development through these new technologies. And I think all of the youth in this room and watching online are eager to make change happen. But sometimes it can be difficult to even know where to start, even if you have these technological ideas and you have access to these technology platforms. So before we open it up to the audience for a few questions, I would like to hear your very practical advice for the youth in this room. What are some steps that we can take to ensure that our governments around the world actually invest in human capital?
Okay, well, I talked a little bit about the learning gap, and I think this is something that actually is probably relevant for every country here. Sorry, I've just popped this thing off here. I hope I'm not messing things up for our technology. I talked a little bit about this learning gap, and this is really, really interesting because this is the first time this data has been available. So, as I said, we've always, in international development, we've measured progress in enrollment years. So how many more years of enrollment have we got? And we've actually measured in the index up to a possible 14 years, which is the highest that you go to at the end of secondary school. And then when we put all the test scores that we had from around the world into a harmonized data set, and we were able to do that because there's a lot of overlap between the tests. And just to give you some concrete examples of some big and important countries around the world, you can see what it means. So hands up, who's here from Brazil? Okay, so in Brazil, what the index shows is that out of 11.7 years, so kids are in school an average of 11.7 years, they're receiving learning the equivalent of 7.6 years. So that's a learning gap of just over 4 years. So 4 years that the taxpayers of Brazil are paying for that kids are not learning. For Nigeria, who's here from Nigeria? Okay, so Nigeria for 8.2 years of schooling is translating into 4.2 years of learning. So this is the equivalent of a learning gap of 4 years. So about half of the years that kids are at school. And then Pakistan, very similar, out of a total of 8.8 years of schooling, the equivalent of 4.8 years of learning. Now, when you look at the data in these countries, and I haven't got the results here, but in lots of middle-income countries, what we're worried about in terms of enrollment is making sure that all kids get to school. And there's been a huge international effort to increase the enrollment of girls. And that's still a really big agenda around the world. But when we look at the learning, we also see a gender gap going in the opposite direction, turning up, where boys' learning outcomes are lagging behind girls. So in some countries, that gap is another year. And that's perhaps an issue that's been explored. So what I think, what advice do I have on what you can do with this? I mean, the first thing is to check how your country is doing, and I always sort of think that young people have multiple dimensions to your life. So of course you're all members of families. So what are the choices you're making in your family about you and your siblings and your kids, if you have kids? Many of you are consumers or beneficiaries or students in the education system. So you actually are actually going through education systems where these learning gaps are actually happening. So you need to raise your voice here. Many of you are active by virtue of the fact that you're here. It suggests to me that you're all active in civil society. And so you have an opportunity to play a role through civil society organizations. So what I think our goal in the World Bank, when we produce data like this, is to try and help create a well-informed public policy discussion about why this is important and what will help countries to actually improve these results. We're in the business of trying to help countries grow and develop their way out of poverty. And we want to change two numbers. We want to reduce the level of absolute extreme poverty in the world, and we want to help raise the living standards of everybody, including the bottom 40%. So use us as a resource to help create a more informed public policy debate about the challenges in your country and what can be done. Now, one thing about health and education outcomes, they're often actually not even national level issues. Often they are issues at the provincial or the district or the state level. So in a way, government is even more close to where you live. So there is actually, I think, an opportunity here for us to partner with civil society and with young people. And actually, I don't know if any of you watched the Global Citizen, is it?
Global Citizen Festival.
Global Citizen
Yeah,
Festival
South
in
Africa.
Johannesburg in the weekend. And my boss, Dr. Kim, the president of the World Bank, he basically said when he was young, he was told never to trust anybody over 30. And his advice for you is unchanged. Because these issues are affecting your future and the future of the kids coming behind you as well. These numbers are a reality for millions of young people on the planet today who have left school and who face challenges because they don't have good education, good skills, and they need to get jobs.
Thank you. I think we're all inspired to do our part in increasing human capital in our own countries when we go back to our communities after the Youth Summit. I'd like to open the floor now to the audience for a few questions. If you can line up. We don't have time. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm told that we don't have time for questions, unfortunately. I'm really sorry about that. But thank you so much, Annette, for joining us for this event. If you do have questions, please feel free to ask them on Twitter. We will answer as a community as well. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. No worries. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. So we are now about to enter a short little break where we're going to have an opportunity to get some coffee, stretch out, go to the restroom, come back in here before we resume with the next presentation. We will be on the next presentation. Whoops, excuse me. We will be talking about where is it? Leveraging technology to ramp up human potential. But during the break, we will be playing a video on human capital, which was produced by the World Bank for the annual meetings in Bali. It will be playing on loop, so feel free to stay or come back. It'll keep replaying over the next 15 minutes. We'll see you back here in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Quiero contar historias con mis dibujos.
I want to do science.
Precious businesswoman.
I want to be an engineer.
To make rehabilitation affordable for as many patients as possible.
Invest in me.
Eso ha sido el cambio en la comunidad y en mi hogar especialmente, ¿no? En ellos está el cambio. Son inteligentes, desde su sueño de ellos es ser líder.
Esos nutrientes de los alimentos que traía con mi abuelita, todos, mi familia, fueron un gran partícipe de mi vida. Pero ahora ya estoy pasando a una siguiente etapa, preuniversitaria, esa formación.
Mereka mempunyai mental atau jiwa wirausaha.
Kita juga diajarkan kewirausahaan.
Motivate kids them how to think about logic.
Karena pendidikan sendiri adalah fundamental bagi anak bangsa untuk nanti mereka memajukan bangsanya.
There's this stereotype, you can't make it or something.
I borrowed some money and I bought a laptop and started programming the website.
No creo que sea un campus solo para varones.
In 6 months, I managed to publish it online.
Pero está en la decisión de uno mismo poder romper esas barreras y realmente involucrarse en tecnología.
Nobody has experience on how that solution needs to be built.
We're forcing them to be creative, to be curious, and to explore. And then we figure it out. It's such a reward. It's so exciting. It's almost like a eureka moment. We can just come up with something really huge.
Estoy saludable. Belajar untuk mengembangkan kemampuan diri saya. Puedo trabajar, puedo hacerlo. Untuk selangkah lebih dekat menggapai mimpi dan cita-cita saya.
Yo quisiera llegar hasta donde ni siquiera aún lo he pensado.
I get to do what I love every day.
Puedo hacer mis sueños.
I'm pretty happy.
Porque en realidad no tengo límites.
It makes my dream and my talent come true.
Invest in me.
Invierte en mí.
Invest in me.
Invest in me.
In me.
Invest in me. Quiero contar historias con mis dibujos. Saya pengen jadi produser film.
I want to do science.
Fashion businesswoman.
I want to be an engineer.
To make rehabilitation affordable to as many patients as possible.
Invest in me.
Eso ha sido el cambio en la comunidad y en mi hogar especialmente, ¿no? En ellos está el cambio. Son inteligentes, su sueño de ellos es ser líder.
Esos nutrientes de los alimentos que traía con mi abuelita, todos, mi familia, fueron un gran partícipe de mi vida. Pero ahora ya estoy pasando a una siguiente etapa, preuniversitaria, esa formación.
Mereka mempunyai mental atau jiwa wirausaha.
Kita juga diajarkan kewirausahaan.
Motivate kids, teach them how to think about logic.
Karena pendidikan sendiri adalah fundamental bagi anak bangsa untuk nanti mereka memajukan bangsanya.
There's this stereotype, you can't make it or something.
I borrowed some money and I bought a laptop and started programming the website.
No creo que sea un campus solo para varones.
In 6 months, I managed to publish it online.
Pero está en la decisión de uno mismo poder romper esas barreras y realmente involucrarse en tecnología.
Nobody has experience on how that solution needs to be built.
We're forcing them to be creative, to be curious, and to explore, and then we figure it out. It's such a reward. It's so exciting. It's almost like a eureka moment.
We can just come up with something really huge.
Estoy saludable,
Belajar untuk mengembangkan kemampuan diri saya
puedo trabajar, puedo hacerlo.
untuk selangkah lebih dekat menggapai mimpi dan cita-cita saya.
Yo quisiera llegar hasta donde ni siquiera aún lo he pensado.
I get to do what I love every day.
Puedo hacer mis sueños,
I'm pretty happy.
porque en realidad no tengo límites.
It makes my dream and my talent come true.
Invest in me.
Invierte en mí.
Invest in me.
Invest in me.
In me.
Invest in me.
Quiero contar historias con mis dibujos.
Saya pengen jadi produser film.
I want to do science.
Fashion businesswoman.
I want to be an engineer.
To make rehabilitation affordable to as many patients as possible.
Invest in me.
Eso ha sido el cambio en la comunidad y en mi hogar especialmente, ¿no? En ellos está el cambio. Son inteligentes, su sueño de ellos es ser líder.
Esos nutrientes de los alimentos que traía con mi abuelita, todos, mi familia, fueron un gran partícipe de mi vida. Pero ahora ya estoy pasando a una siguiente etapa, preuniversitaria, esa formación.
Mereka mempunyai mental atau jiwa wirausaha.
Kita juga diajarkan kewirausahaan.
Motivate kids, teach them how to think about logic.
Karena pendidikan sendiri adalah fundamental bagi anak bangsa untuk nanti mereka memajukan bangsanya.
There's this stereotype, you can't make it or something.
I borrowed some money and I bought a laptop and started programming the website.
No creo que sea un campus solo para varones.
In 6 months, I managed to publish it online.
Pero está en la decisión de uno mismo poder romper esas barreras y realmente involucrarse en tecnología.
Nobody has experience on how that solution needs to be built.
We're forcing them to be creative, to be curious, and to explore, and then we figure it out. It's such a reward. It's so exciting. It's almost like a eureka moment.
We can just come up with something really huge.
Estoy saludable,
Belajar untuk mengembangkan kemampuan diri saya
puedo trabajar, puedo hacerlo.
untuk selangkah lebih dekat menggapai mimpi dan cita-cita saya.
Yo quisiera llegar hasta donde ni siquiera aún lo he pensado.
I get to do what I love every day.
Puedo hacer mis sueños,
I'm pretty happy.
porque en realidad no tengo límites.
It makes my dream and my talent come true.
Invest in me.
Invierte en mí.
Invest in me.
Invest in me.
In me.
Invest in me.
Quiero contar historias con mis dibujos.
Saya pengen jadi produser film.
I want to do science.
Fashion businesswoman.
I want to be an engineer.
To make rehabilitation affordable to as many patients as possible.
Invest in me.
Eso ha sido el cambio en la comunidad y en mi hogar especialmente, ¿no? En ellos está el cambio. Son inteligentes, su sueño de ellos es ser líder.
Esos nutrientes de los alimentos que traía con mi abuelita, todos, mi familia, fueron un gran partícipe de mi vida. Pero ahora ya estoy pasando a una siguiente etapa, preuniversitaria, esa formación.
Mereka mempunyai mental atau jiwa wirausaha.
Kita juga diajarkan kewirausahaan.
Motivate kids, teach them how to think about logic.
Karena pendidikan sendiri adalah fundamental bagi anak bangsa untuk nanti mereka memajukan bangsanya.
There's this stereotype, you can't make it or something.
I borrowed some money and I bought a laptop and started programming the website.
No creo que sea un campus solo para varones,
In 6 months, I managed to publish it online.
pero está en la decisión de uno mismo poder romper esas barreras y realmente involucrarse en tecnología.
Nobody has experience on how that solution needs to be built.
We're forcing them to be creative, to be curious, and to explore, and then we figure it out. It's such a reward. It's so exciting. It's almost like a eureka moment.
We can just come up with something really huge.
Estoy saludable,
Belajar untuk mengembangkan kemampuan diri saya
puedo trabajar, puedo hacerlo.
untuk selangkah lebih dekat menggapai mimpi dan cita-cita saya.
Yo quisiera llegar hasta donde ni siquiera aún lo he pensado.
I get to do what I love every day.
Puedo hacer mis sueños,
I'm pretty happy.
porque en realidad no tengo límites.
It makes my dream and my talent come true.
Invest in me.
Invierte en mí.
Invest in me.
Invest in me.
In me.
Invest in me.
Quiero contar historias con mis dibujos.
Saya pengen jadi produser film.
I want to do science.
Fashion businesswoman.
I want to be an engineer.
To make rehabilitation affordable to as many patients as possible.
Invest in me.
Eso ha sido el cambio en la comunidad y en mi hogar especialmente, ¿no? En ellos está el cambio. son inteligentes, desde su sueño de ellos es ser líder.
Esos nutrientes de los alimentos que traía con mi abuelita, todos, mi familia, fueron un gran partícipe de mi vida. Pero ahora ya estoy pasando a una siguiente etapa, preuniversitaria, esa formación.
Mereka mempunyai mental atau jiwa wirausaha.
Kita juga diajarkan kewirausahaan.
Motivate kids, teach them how to think about logic.
Karena pendidikan sendiri adalah fundamental bagi anak bangsa untuk nanti mereka memajukan bangsanya.
There's this stereotype, you can't make it or something.
I borrowed some money and I bought a laptop and started programming the website.
No creo que sea un campus solo para varones,
In 6 months, I managed to publish it online.
pero está en la decisión de uno mismo poder romper esas barreras y realmente involucrarse en tecnología.
Nobody has experience on how that solution needs to be built.
We're forcing them to be creative, to be curious, and to explore. And then we figure it out. It's such a reward. It's so exciting. It's almost like a eureka moment.
We can just come up with something really huge.
Estoy saludable,
Belajar untuk mengembangkan kemampuan diri saya
puedo trabajar, puedo hacerlo.
untuk selangkah lebih dekat menggapai mimpi dan cita-cita saya.
Yo quisiera llegar hasta donde ni siquiera aún lo he pensado.
I get to do what I love every day.
Puedo hacer mis sueños,
I'm pretty happy.
porque en realidad no tengo límites.
It makes my dream and my talent come true.
Invest in me.
Invierte en mí.
Invest in me.
Invest in me.
In me.
Invest in me.
Quiero contar historias con mis dibujos.
Saya pengen jadi produser film.
I want to do science.
Fashion businesswoman.
I want to be an engineer.
To make rehabilitation affordable to as many patients as possible.
Invest in me.
Eso ha sido el cambio en la comunidad y en mi hogar especialmente, ¿no? En ellos está el cambio. Son inteligentes, desde su sueño de ellos es ser líder.
Esos nutrientes de los alimentos que traía con mi abuelita, todos, mi familia, fueron un gran partícipe de mi vida. Pero ahora ya estoy pasando a una siguiente etapa, preuniversitaria, esa formación.
Mereka mempunyai mental atau jiwa wirausaha.
Kita juga diajarkan kewirausahaan.
Motivate kids, teach them how to think about logic.
Karena pendidikan sendiri adalah fundamental bagi anak bangsa untuk nanti mereka memajukan bangsanya.
There's this stereotype, you can't make it or something.
I borrowed some money and I bought a laptop and started programming the website.
No creo que sea un campus solo para varones,
In 6 months, I managed to publish it online.
pero está en la decisión de uno mismo poder romper esas barreras y realmente involucrarse en tecnología.
Nobody has experience on how that solution needs to be built.
We're forcing them to be creative, to be curious, and to explore. And then we figure it out. It's such a reward. It's so exciting. It's almost like a eureka moment.
We can just come up with something really huge.
Estoy saludable,
Belajar untuk mengembangkan kemampuan diri saya
puedo trabajar, puedo hacerlo.
untuk selangkah lebih dekat menggapai mimpi dan cita-cita saya.
Yo quisiera llegar hasta donde ni siquiera aún lo he pensado.
I get to do what I love every day.
Puedo hacer mis sueños,
I'm pretty happy.
porque porque en realidad no tengo límites.
It makes my dream and my talent come true.
Invest in me.
Invierte en mí.
Invest in me.
Invest in me.
In me.
Invest in me.
All right, everyone, please begin taking your seats. We will start in 1 minute. Please take your seats. We have our next panel ready to come out. All right, everyone. Oh, where is? All right, everyone, please take your seats. Please take your seats. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the final panel session of the day, which will focus on leveraging technology to ramp up human potential. We're very excited to have Andy Rabins as our panel moderator. Andy is a special advisor for the global youth issues at the U.S. Department of State. He serves as the principal representative on youth issues for the department and leads efforts to coordinate and amplify youth policy and initiatives. He also serves as a senior advisor for entrepreneurship and innovation in the Office of the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. He graduated from Harvard University and holds a master's degree from the London School of Economics. Please help me welcome Andy to the stage. Thank you. Good to meet you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to invite our panelists up real quick just so we can get settled, and then I'll set the stage and we'll jump right into things. So let me invite our fabulous panel up. Fabulous.
Oh, no, you're okay. No, don't worry. Yeah.
All right, before we jump into things, I just want to give one more round of applause for, we just heard two fabulous youth engagement announcements. One, I think, from our colleagues at the U.S. Agency for International Development. So one big round of applause for anyone gone on youthlead.org yet? Anyone joined youthlead.org yet during the break? Couple people? Fabulous. All right. And then also for our colleagues at World Bank. The Human Capital Index, another great announcement. So my name's Andy Rabins, and I serve as the Special Advisor for Global Youth Issues at the U.S. Department of State. And I'm joined this afternoon by a fabulous panel of experts in the tech, the education, the youth and human development spaces. And I'm excited to have them introduce themselves in just a minute. But before I do, I wanted to set the stage very briefly for this session, which we hope is going to be really interactive. We want to also make sure we have a whole bunch of time for you all to share your insights, your advice, your thoughts. I think we've got folks in the room from about 117 countries around the globe and many entrepreneurs. So we want your insights here too. Now, as we all know, this year's World Bank Youth Summit is focused on the theme of unlocking and unleashing the power of human capital and exploring how do we better equip young people with the tools and the networks needed to realize their full potential, to pursue their passions, and to tackle some of the pressing challenges of the day. And we know that any discussion on unlocking human capital in today's 21st century globalized, innovation-fueled economy, well, it has to be coupled up with a discussion on the role that technology can play to leverage, to ramp up, and to further unlock that potential. While we recognize that technology can bring immense opportunities for greater communication, for collaboration, for economic growth and prosperity, we also recognize that there are some new challenges, some potential fears that technology may create. And we have to figure out a way to appropriately navigate some of those challenges and fears, the changing job landscape, the future of work, the need for investment in new skills, the rethinking of some of our educational structures. So for the next 80 minutes, we've got a chance to dive into these issues in more depth. And we've got a fabulous panel of experts who not only know the space, but also believe in the transformative power of technology as a force for good. So the way we're gonna kind of tackle this session is, I'm first gonna give the panelists a chance to just introduce themselves and to give just a quick snapshot of how they see technology as a force for unlocking some of this human potential. Then I'm going to ask a few questions to get the conversation started so we can go in a little deeper, dig a little deeper on a few pertinent topics. And then I want to open things up pretty quickly to you all to share your insights and your advice and your thoughts and also your questions for the panelists as well. Does that sound like a plan? Okay. Folks feel energized? Get your coffee and caffeine. So without further ado, let me start. Maybe we'll start with Julie at the end here and allow each of the panelists to just introduce themselves. You can seat, you can stand, and give a snapshot of technology as kind of that transformative force for unlocking human potential.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Andy, and good afternoon. Everybody awake after lunch? Yes? Raise your hand if you're awake. Okay, good job, good job. My name is Julie Klugage. I am co-founder and executive director of a nonprofit called Team for Tech. We're based out in Silicon Valley in California, and our mission is to advance the quality of teaching and learning with relevant technology solutions. And the way we do that is by partnering with leading technology companies and engaging and equipping teams of their employees as pro bono consultants for nonprofits working on education in developing countries. So, just to answer Andy's first question briefly, and we can definitely get more into it, obviously we feel like there's huge potential of technology to make a difference in improving teaching and learning. We view it in sort of 3 stages. It can certainly expand access to relevant digital content. Secondly, it can accelerate knowledge acquisition through personalized learning, adaptive learning. And third, it's a powerful tool for knowledge creation, basically equipping everyone to use technology to create new knowledge, to creative problem solve. But there are definitely risks. Our philosophy is that the teacher is the center, and we've seen many studies where if you just drop technology in, you're actually going to end up lowering learning outcomes. And so in our program, we focus on how technology can support teacher professional development and provide scaffolded usage models, which there was a World Bank study in 2015, and they looked at 20 different interventions, and they found that when you couple technology implementation with teacher professional development and a guided usage model, that actually had the largest positive income. So that's the way we approach it.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Rocio Ortega, and I actually work across the street at the United Nations Foundation under an initiative called Girl Up. You might have seen us in the booth outside. If you haven't, I encourage you to check it out tomorrow. But Girl Up really is a leadership initiative led by girls, led by youth. We believe that girls are the leaders, not of tomorrow, not of the future, but of right now. And what that means is that we provide different resources, toolkits necessary for girls to define what gender equality means to them in their community and to drive those different initiatives in their schools, in their churches, in different organizations. We started in 2010, and let me tell you that when we started back then, it was only meant for youth in the US. But you know, after you tell your friend and they tell their friend and they tell everybody, it really spread. And now, you know, almost 8 years later, we are in over 100 countries, and we have over almost 2,000 clubs, which is amazing to see, and specifically for me because I actually started with Girl Up when I was 16 years old. So now that I get to work for them, it's like dream come true, right? So really encourage you all to check us out, girlup.org, but we are an initiative of the United Nations Foundation, and it's really to tap into the leadership potential of girls everywhere to achieve gender equality.
Awesome. My name's Joel Sadler. I'm the founder of Piper. We make DIY STEM kits for kids where they build their own computers as a way to learn about computer science. I actually grew up in Jamaica. I think I saw someone from Barbados earlier. Here we go. Anyone from Jamaica? Yeah, awesome. So I grew up there building potato cannons and ended up studying engineering at MIT and Stanford, and then got really bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. So this is the third company I've started, and for me, it's all about creating technology that empowers people. With Piper, we're creating solutions to help teachers who don't have any experience with technology actually sort of teach computer science, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, the fundamental literacies that we think everyone needs to graduate with, and math, English, we all agree is important, but also I think computer literacy and technology literacy is the next generation of what we need for the workforce. So with Piper, you guys can check it out. We'll be discussing this a little bit over the panel, but our model is all about going into a classroom, inspiring kids to build their first computer, the same way I built mine when I was in Jamaica. This is the modern version of that, and it's a wooden kit that you build yourself using open resources like the Raspberry Pi. And this has been a great way to get kids introduced into the fundamental literacies that I've been talking about, whether that's mechanically building with a screwdriver, or wiring up circuits with electrical circuits, or programming in Python. I think the foundation of education is what I'm really excited about talking with you guys about, and looking forward to the discussion.
Hi everyone, I'm Nadia Okamoto. I'm 20 years old and I'm a rising junior at Harvard College, but I'm actually taking a year off from Harvard to continue growing my nonprofit, which is called Period, the Menstrual Movement. I started it about 4 years ago, inspired sort of by my family's experience with housing instability, and what we do is we provide and celebrate menstrual hygiene through service, education, and advocacy. So we break the stigma around how people think about periods and menstruation and everything related to it. We fight for access to period products affordably all over the world, and to do so we work with young people. So similar to Girl Up's model, we have about 250 campus chapters at universities and high schools around the US and abroad, and are now in almost all 50 states and 30 countries, and we're working in policy from the local to the federal level here in the US to get period products in schools, restrooms, and to take down a sales tax on period products that labels them as luxury items in 35 states in the US. So part of my taking time off from Harvard is I just published my first book last month. It's called Period Power, a Manifesto for the Menstrual Movement, and I just published it with Simon & Schuster. And it sort of covers my work with period and the menstrual movement, and a little bit about my story, like very memoir-esque. And I also ran for office in Cambridge, Massachusetts when I was a Harvard freshman for city council. And we didn't win, but we made history with student and youth turnout in the city. So that was enough for me to be like, done and get some sleep again. And then I'm Chief Brand Officer at Juve Consulting, which is a Gen Z marketing agency that really works to talk to big companies like Microsoft and Unilever and Hershey's about how to prepare for this rising generation of Gen Zers born after 1996 that currently controls $143 billion of purchasing power. And we make up the largest segment of a population in the history of the world at 26% of the global population. So I think why I'm excited to answer your question, to talk about tech here as it relates to the future of human potential, is specifically around social media, right? Because when you see how Gen Z is currently 46% of the total media audience, and when you look at how big conglomerate companies and brands are trying to market to Gen Z, the majority of it is through Instagram and Snapchat, right? And I mean, I recently looked at my average time spent on my phone, and it was like 5 hours on Instagram a day, which is like depressing, but also not low for an average Gen Zer, right? And in the US, the average young person gets their first smartphone by the time they're 10 years old, right? So I've been really interested in how social media and how us being digital natives is not only affecting our daily lives and our careers, but also the economy around us.
Cool. We mentioned 20 years old, too.
Thanks for letting me have to follow that. So hey everyone, my name's Tony Prince. I work for Microsoft, and how many here have heard of Microsoft? That wasn't a joke. So I got to work for the old Microsoft and the new Microsoft, and it's been a great experience because I've been with the company. I left at one point because the old Microsoft kind of burned me out, but I with the company on and off for about 23 years, and I can tell you that the new Microsoft's really cool and doing incredible stuff. And there is no more important topic than we could be having than the one we're having today, because it's core to what we're doing. And in particular, I serve for our education lead for the Americas. So I work with institutions and systems all throughout the Americas, and they're all trying to solve the same problem, which is how do we transform? And when I talk to institutions and when I talk to students, the first thing they ask me about is, what is AI going to do to me? What is AI going to do to us? What's the impact of AI? And I know that we're very early yet, but there's probably no more important impact that we're going to have on society than what's going to be happening with as computers continue to get smarter and smarter. So one of the things that we try to do is empower all individuals to have the skills to be successful with technologies like AI and blockchain and the future things like quantum computing. So our job is really, and we have a series of programs, and I'm sure we'll touch on these things today, is to make sure that we can absolutely empower all of you to unleash the potential in all of you to do good work for society going forward. So we look forward to talking about that.
So quick show of hands before we jump into a couple questions. How many of you all are entrepreneurs currently? Just show of hands. Fabulous. How many of you all are planning to do entrepreneurship full-time, either after school, leave school maybe, give it a real go? Whole lot of folks. Awesome. So just for kind of thinking about skill sets that I think this panel can offer, that's a great sense of things. How many of y'all, real quick also, how many of y'all are feeling pretty confident about kind of the future economy in your respective communities and countries, that jobs are going to be there, that by 2030 that the skill sets that we all have are going to be ready for the workforce? How many people are feeling a little bit nervous? Okay, great. So the first question I want to pose, kind of just, you see the numbers, and there's a pretty striking figure that says that by 2030, about 2 billion of the jobs that currently exist are going to change in some fashion. That this generation of folks who are entering grade school globally today, 2 out of 3 kids are going to go into professions that don't even exist yet. So first question, kind of thinking about this future of workspace, kind of how can we, from either a skills perspective or just kind of thinking about this and not being struck by fear that kind of the place we're moving, the technology is not going to be that job displacer, but really can be something that can create new industries. And how can we be prepared as a generation of millennials, Gen Zers, to really be able to be ready to succeed in that 21st century innovation-fueled economy?
Yeah. Oh, do you want me? Yeah. So just to add like a couple stats, you've probably all seen the charts about the increasing demand for non-routine cognitive skills. And this is true not just OECD countries, but countries all over the world. Increasing demand for non-routine, complex cognitive skills, decreasing demand for routine skills. The other thing that I think is interesting, and this is all from the 2016 World Development Report, is that the intensity of technology usage in the labor market is increasing twice as fast in developing countries as opposed to OECD countries. So 1/3 of all urban workers now in developing countries use a computer regularly as part of their job. So those two trends are really good news for people who have unique, highly developed cognitive skills and know how to use technology really well. As you can imagine, it's not great news for people who have jobs that require only routine skills and only have ability to do those kind of jobs. So fundamentally, technology is an amplification of these inequality trends. And unless we do something to intervene there, that's not good news for the future. So I think the goal is, in terms of what's needed for the future, is an ability to learn how to learn. I think, as we just talked about, technology has huge promise in that area, but we need to take active steps so that everyone has access, everyone feels confident, digitally literate, to access, online learning platforms, digital content, and then finally that people can use technology, a part of their job, to actually create new knowledge.
If I could just add in something real quick. One thing that we really take into consideration at Girl Up, and along with some of our partners like the State Department and private donors and corporations, is really, if we're talking about human potential, we have to talk about women and girls from the very beginning. It's not we didn't think about them until like the last steps or something like that. So one thing that we do is called our STEM for Social Good program. And what that means is that it's either staff or girls requesting certain staff members to come into their schools and talk about what are those gender barriers that girls face when they even start thinking about, maybe I should be a computer scientist. And so what we're doing is really going at the micro level and encouraging girls to get comfortable talking about STEM, handling equipment like this, which you can see here. And it's really about finding those initial steps and getting girls comfortable and empowered to even begin to think that they can actually pursue STEM careers, because we know that they can. It's just that sometimes they need that mentor to really get them going, or they need somebody like us to reach out to them and do that. So I think, to summarize, like in general, if we want to move forward, we can't forget women and girls from the very, very beginning.
Yeah, I love that point, because I think, if we're going to prepare everyone for the future of jobs, I think getting everyone involved, those early experiences that spark, inspiration and confidence, we've found that is actually the limiting factor for us, is how do we make people feel confident with these emerging, tools, technology, and STEM. If I were to predict, we have a strong prediction for what we think the jobs of the future are going to be, and it's 2 words. Every job is going to require creativity in some form, and probably computation. So, what I advocate for, and what we've built into Piper is this notion of creative computing as the skill set for the future. This was my PhD dissertation at Stanford. I got pretty obsessed with this and eventually led into Piper. But I think it's about creativity, open-ended problem solving. That's not going to go away. And probably the jobs of the future are going to have computation in some form, whether that's software, electronics, programming, maybe not even programming in the typing sense. But that's something that we think we'll see in this world of emerging jobs.
Sort of building off of what he was saying as well, I think that one of the big things that I think is lacking in a lot of schools, especially here in the US, is like not only teaching students like what to learn, but like to love to learn as well, right? And I think that I was very fortunate to go to a high school where we actually had no grades. It was simply based on feedback, and it was just trying to teach kids to like want to think and like want to creatively think and critically think, right? And I think that when you look at this age of entrepreneurship where like, yeah, at Harvard, like the epitome of success is not how much money you make all the time, but like whether or not you can drop out of school sooner than everyone else because you have something to do, right? Or like the fact that students all over the US are preparing for the idea that they can follow their passions because we're entering a hobby economy where you can hop on your phone and become like a Postmates deliverer or an Uber driver or Lyft driver at any point and be able to sort of embrace your own creativity at the same time, right? So I think that it's building off of what everyone is saying, like very much so creativity, but also pushing students to love to learn and feel empowered that if they have an idea, you can create something out of it. Right now, it doesn't matter what qualifications you have or how old you are or how much investors you have, like you can just go for it and do it. And I would say building off of what Rocio was talking about with women and girls, that's why I'm so passionate about periods. And I know it's not a very usual thing to be passionate about, but I always say, like, my end goal is not achieving this menstrual movement, fighting for menstrual equity, right? But it's really fighting for global gender equality. Because when you look at what the leading cause of absenteeism for girls around the world, periods are the #1 reason why girls miss school in developing countries, and period-related pain is the leading cause of absenteeism for girls in the US, right? And universally, it's something where a girl's first period signifies their transition from girlhood into womanhood, where that event often sparks when a girl gets married or drops out of school or undergoes female genital mutilation or social isolation. And I think that a lot of this work is just trying to shift that conversation to say that even if you do get your period and you menstruate regularly, it's something that shouldn't hold anyone back from going to school or embracing employment and economic mobility.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is that I don't think governments understand the urgency here as much as they really need to. I mean, you quoted 50 million jobs in 2030 that require technical skills. The graduating class, and this is a United States statistic, is about 10% of the graduates will be CS majors this year. The gap is enormous. So we really need to promote computer science literacy as a core competence in schools everywhere. Today, I think in the United States, about 65% of schools do not teach STEM as a base requirement for education. And so we're trying to do work to try to change that. We're trying to promote as much as we can STEM in schools. We have complete toolkits and bills of materials through our Youth Spark program to go out there and help schools prepare and have leaders have confidence that they can retrain teachers and introduce these programs. But there has to be a greater degree of urgency. There will truly be a massive shift that's going to be happening in the workplace if we don't move much, much quicker. And then the last piece, just to Rocio's point on women, we've done a lot of research in this area as well, and again, the statistics are staggering. Technology is everywhere. It's in every part of society. It's everything we do today. Women are avid users of technology. How many hours a day were you on? I was a little embarrassed to hear that, quite frankly. Yet, women are not contributing at the same rate to the content creation of technology and the media that supports that. And that's just, that is a significant loss for all of us, as if we don't get more women involved, not only we will not be able to scale the innovation that we need to be successful, not only for those 50 million jobs, but for the good that we can do for societies, is going to be really, it's going to be staggering. So, so from that standpoint, I just think there has to be more urgency and, more programs and more support and more awareness and building more confidence across everyone that needs to participate in this.
Awesome. So running with that piece of things, and I think when you also look at the numbers of women CEOs and women-owned businesses and where venture capital or access to finance is going, I think it's less than, 5 to 7% are actually going to women CEOs or women-owned businesses. One more show of hands for the women entrepreneurs out there? Fabulous. Fabulous. So as kind of successful entrepreneurs, folks working in the entrepreneurship space, are there any advice for both women and men? Joel, you've started 3 businesses, and Rocio, you've seen it from kind of a variety of angles with Girl Up. Nadia's CTO already, and has kind of done the entrepreneurship, running a campaign that's kind of in a different space. Julie and Tony have vast experience kind of from the business side, and then Julie starting her own thing in the entrepreneurship space. Any advice for kind of the entrepreneurs out there thinking about how do you actually sell your product, pitch investors, get that funding, or kind of be able to translate your story into your business and make it all work? You want to take a first shot? Joel, you want to give it the first crack?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, having grown up in Jamaica and reflecting on what it took to get a successful business off the ground. I think one thing is just ignoring the odds against you and just blasting through. I don't think I ever really even thought about what was coming against me as an underrepresented minority. I just did it. I saw problems that needed to be solved, and we made products to solve things for people. And ultimately, that's what will shine through. If you solve problems that are really important to people, you will succeed with persistence and good problem solving. So I think that's sort of like the most important thing, acknowledging that there are going to be factors against you in the investment community. Yes, like if you're a female entrepreneur, getting VC investment is less common, but that doesn't mean I would just ignore it, frankly, push through, and ultimately persistence and good problem solving is what shines through in the end.
I have an absolutely opposite approach where I take all of the things that are at odds against me, all the stats, all the comments, and I put them right in front of me and I use them to like motivate the fuck out of myself, right? And I think it's because I grew up, elementary school, middle school, everyone was like, you can do it, you're a star, go for it, right? And I was like, well, clearly that sort of thinking is not helping me stand out from everyone else if everyone is being thought that way. And I don't know if it's a healthy mental thought, but what I started doing is when I found a stat, for example, when I was running for office and I learned that less than 20% of congressional positions in the US are held by women, but over 50% of the population are women, right? I literally wrote that stat on a Post-it note and I put it on my mirror and I was like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? Or every time I went to a pitch competition, if I didn't win, and I usually won, but if I didn't win and the person who won was a white guy, I was like, that's why I have to keep going, right? And I just try to use every ounce of it. And now I do a lot of advocacy about policy change, and periods are surprisingly more controversial than anyone thinks they are. And so we regularly get death threats, and everyone will tell me, ignore the comments, ignore the hate stuff. And I just save it on Instagram, and I look at it when I need some inspiration, and I'm like, this is why I'm gonna do it. But I think that at the same time, if you can't handle that, yes, ignore it. And at a certain point when the hate is too personal or whatever, or the no's feel like a lot, just ignore it and keep going. But I think that as an underrepresented minority or a woman, and especially a woman of color, I feel a lot of responsibility of I am privileged to be able to go to Harvard, right? Which is the epitome of privilege, right? Or I'm privileged to be able to have grown up with parents who really cared about education. And I think the way I reconcile my privilege is to realize that I have the opportunity to break barriers for people to come after me, right? I would also say that there are so many people who are trying to start businesses right now. Being a young change maker and a youth entrepreneur, when I started 4 years ago, it felt new, right? When I introduced myself and said I was an entrepreneur, it felt new. Wake up call, it's not really new anymore, right? It's something that a lot of people are trying to start businesses. And so I think that it really does become more personal. And the reason I'm so passionate about brand and storytelling is because I think that when you start making your pitches and you start trying to tell people why they should care about what you're doing, so much of it is about the story of why you're doing it, right? When I started my organization, Period, I kept coming across these barriers of people being like, I don't care about periods, especially old white men who are I really don't want to be hearing about this right now. But for me, what helped me get across the barrier was telling my story, right? I started my nonprofit because my family was homeless my freshman and sophomore year of high school, and I was stuck in this really abusive relationship where sexual assault and rape were a regular part of my life. And it was from learning about the barriers of success because of basic need like periods, and me starting to realize that when I said the word period and got someone over the hump of feeling uncomfortable by simply a word, that I felt this sort of you're part of the problem and I could do something to change it, right? But it wasn't until I learned to share my story and say, I'm gonna get on stage and make myself a little bit more vulnerable because I wanna hear your story, and all of our stories matter, so let's be in a part of this together, right? And I see that, especially with a lot of my mentees or the companies I work with through Juve Consulting, is we have a lot of clients who do the same thing, right? Are all running some sort of social media, empower young people, or are all trying to launch the next product that everyone's gonna use, right? The difference is both in the founder's story and how they pitch their company, but also in the story that the product gives to each of their users, right? And I think that that's where, when you see this mass upbringing of young people wanting to do something, what's gonna make you stand out and reach that success is the persistence. It doesn't matter how you get to it, but the persistence, and also the storytelling of why you're so passionate about what you do.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that, I have less of an entrepreneurial view, but more of a big company view. I talked about sort of the old Microsoft, new Microsoft, and there's two reasons why the company changed. It's mission and mindset. And in the mission, the company finally asked itself, what does the world need from us? Why are we here? What do we serve? What purpose do we serve? And I think that was a dramatic change from we are a Windows first, Windows only world, and everyone will love Windows, and everyone's going to adopt Windows. And when you open yourself up and you allow yourself to really understand, what do people need from us? What do schools need from us? What do students need from us? What do entrepreneurs need from us? It really completely changed the dynamic. And we're an open source company now, almost entirely. More than half our workloads that run on our cloud are open source based. And adopting things like that really enabled us to think much more broadly and openly about what the world needed. And then from a mindset perspective, it goes to exactly what you were saying, which is that I could tell you I sat in meetings in the old Microsoft, which were people would have ideas, and those ideas would get shot down and shot down and shot down because it never worked before. That doesn't work. We shouldn't do that. And someone will say, we should paint the walls red. And someone will go, why should we paint the walls red? We painted the walls red last year and that had bad results. We shouldn't paint the walls red. Let's not paint the walls red. Now in the new Microsoft, someone says, let's paint the walls red. We have a discussion about it. We try to learn from it. We try to understand actually why when the walls were red in the past, we failed, and why the walls could be red. It's a terrible example, but why the walls could be red now, and it can actually be beneficial to us, but more importantly to the people we serve. So this mindset change, and we adopted the Carol Dweck, entire philosophy and methodology around mindset. We've infused it into the company from a top-down perspective. We've embraced it, and we challenge each other on it when there's not an open mindset. But these ideas of mission and mindset, that they guide everything you do, you'll probably eventually wind up being successful.
Can I just add to, sort of building off of what Tony was saying, the core of every company is their mission, vision, values, right? And I'm sure a lot of you, I see a lot of nodding heads, your mission, vision, values is something that companies always come back to, right? And your mission is the statement of what you do, right? And so that's more of when you explain your elevator pitch, what you're trying to do in the world, what is it you actually specialize in. But I think every company needs to be purpose-driven and have a vision, right? And that vision is what the world you're trying to create is, right? And then your values are what you always hold with yourself. So in Period's example, while our mission is provide and celebrate periods, right? Our vision is that we envision a world where every human feels ready, confident, capable to discover and reach their full potential regardless of a natural need, right? And that need can be hunger, it can be housing and shelter or whatever, but I think that's the world we're trying to create, and then our values might be compassion or empathy. And Nike and Microsoft are actually really good examples of companies that have very, very strong visions that have nothing to do with technology, but the vision is about people being able to have access to participate in society, right? And I think that I always urge startups to say why are you doing this really? If your company dissolved, right? What is the impact on your world and why is that something you care about? And I think that being able to frame what you do in that sort of context is what can inspire people to get involved and what can inspire investors to give.
Mission, vision, values, super useful.
Can I just drop in a personal note on that? Because I found from, all my friends are entrepreneurs. I think the mission piece I found is, there's two things that I think predict success. One is if an entrepreneur is mission driven, and the second is the mindset, Tony. And I think one thing I'll just warn you all, if you have the mindset that you enjoy failure, entrepreneurship is for you. It's an athletic mindset, having grown up running, right? I ran on the track fields with Usain Bolt as a kid, and all of us were really slow, and I lost every race I had for years. And I think the mindset of an athlete, that I enjoyed that because gradually over time, I got faster and faster and faster until I was, one of the fastest 800-meter runners in Jamaica. The mindset of athleticism, never give up, always be persistent. You have that mission and you have that athletic mindset. That's a predictor for jumping in and doing entrepreneurship. So if you have that, I'd encourage you to dig in there.
Super useful. Mission-driven mindset. Over the Julie.
I was just going to say, I think most people here want to be social entrepreneurs. These are really complex problems who have many different stakeholders. So, we've heard all morning, start with the problem, But start with the problem of all the different stakeholders and look for any potential win-wins. I'll just give you my story. I worked at Intel for 10 years on our education platforms, and I was supporting all of the nonprofits and development agencies who are implementing our education products. And a lot of these nonprofits nonprofits, they would buy the technology, but they didn't have an IT department. They needed help around capacity building. And I just had this hunch, because I had worked on the corporate social responsibility programs, that all of our employees wanted to get involved with that. And the research was showing that millennials, who are the majority of the tech workforce right now, they wanted purpose in their work. It was the number 3 reason they would choose where to go to work. It was like, what's the company do? What's my job title? But what's the purpose of my job? And so we just did this experiment. We were like, hey, we pitched the HR department. We were like, just get us a few $1,000s, and we're just going to pitch this opportunity to see if any of Intel's 100,000 employees want to get involved and do capacity building for these nonprofits. And everybody was like, oh, nobody's going to want to do that. Their manager's not going to let them go. And we were just like, let's just make a small bet. And we put it out there. We got over 500 employees applying for 15 spots. It was like harder to get into than Harvard. And so, that was like the aha. And we were like, wait a second, there's like this need over here, but there's also this need over here. And how do we match them up? And so I left Intel and I started this, and now we're doing it at like 10 huge technology companies. And same thing, like hundreds of people applying for this opportunity to go make a difference. So I would just say, like, do a nice stakeholder analysis and figure out where you can find those win-wins.
Yes, very quickly. So at Girl Up, we have a program called Women in Science STEM Camp, where at the culmination of this 2-week STEM program, girls learn how to pitch their products. And they do so at a very fast pace, and we give them anywhere between 2 to 3 minutes to pitch their products to members of the State Department, of Intel, just depends the year, of the private partner. But one thing that I've noticed reoccurring since doing this program since 2015 is that girls learn really, one, about the impact of storytelling, but the girls that end up winning these projects at the end of these pitches are the ones that did their research in a very limited time. And so it's great. Everybody has a wonderful story. You can't deny that. But I think in my experience, what makes that difference are those people that made their research and know how they can actually contribute to solving a problem, to a company. So that's how you make yourself different. And trust me, if you follow that, you will definitely stand out, just from being the person who had to hear different pitches from 100 girls.
Great. Okay. I'm going to ask a couple rapid-fire questions, and I want to open things up to Q&A from the audience. So start thinking about your questions, your insights, your comments as well, if you want to add into the discussion. A couple things. Joel mentioned kind of this idea of failure. I think a lot of people in the States wear it as a badge of honor. When I travel around the world, it's often something that people kind of fight that idea and say, hey, there's plenty of access to finance in the US and Silicon Valley for some of these businesses. But back home in my community, it's really tough. If you fail, your kind of community, your family, your friends and family who put in initial investment, it's not kind of as much of a badge of honor. So how do you try to fail fast without kind of losing your kind of ability or your family's income, or kind of do it in a way that's actually accessible if you're not kind of living in a place where there's real access to finance on a regular basis?
Yeah, there's a bit of research about Navy SEALs. They wanted to figure out, well, how are they so resilient? What's different in the mind of a Navy SEAL versus a non-one? They put them in an MRI, they give them a video game to play, right? They have them fail over and over at this video game, and they look at the pleasure centers to see, are they getting annoyed? Or what they find with Navy SEALs is that they enjoy, every time they lose a game, it doesn't matter if they're winning or they're losing, they learn to love the failure, because they know that that's learning and that's improving. So I think the first thing is a mindset of seeing failure yourself personally as something that is positive, right? Every race I lost on the track field was a way that I learned and I got stronger. And so I think it starts from yourself, regardless of your environment, whether or not you're, not in Silicon Valley and don't have that badge of honor from the outside. It starts with yourself and then transforming from there.
Okay. Quick question, I guess follow-up, or Julie, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I just think I want to be honest with you. When I started Team for Tech 6 years ago, it was my first time starting my own thing, and you really don't know how it's going to work out. And I was worried, like I would have sleepless nights over it. And so I think it's a real thing, fear of failure. I think the place I got to was like, even if you're not scaling to 1 million users, this huge albatross of like rapid scale around everybody's neck, you are learning and you are improving. And I think probably for all of us in this room, like impact is our North Star. And so every time you fail, you're learning something about how do I improve the impact of what I'm trying to do. And I also feel like it's a muscle that you grow over time. Like I worry about it less now because, you know, I worried about it for 3 years. So I think you just got to force yourself to get out there, try it, and just remind yourself you're learning every time.
Can I weigh in as well? So sort of to answer your question, like I'm obviously Asian, but like my grandparents are like Taiwanese and Japanese, and like culturally they know failure exists, but it's not okay, right? Like if like yes, like failure can inspire you to do better, but like I always grew up with sort of the, you know, the sayings of like other people will fail but you will not, right? And I think like that's a lot of like, especially like my Asian American friends, like we all sort of grew up, like my parents weren't like that, but my grandparents were very much like everyone else can but you can't, right? And I think that now like leaving Harvard for an indefinite leave was one of the most terrifying choices I had to make, right? Because, I mean, Harvard, especially for like my grandparents, was sort of a symbol of like why they came to America for like their grandkids. And like for me, it was like leaving Harvard being like, yes, I could fail, but I really can't, right? Because I'm earning money to support my whole family, my mom and my 2 younger sisters. Like the consequences of failing, like even monetarily, are not just on me, it's like on my family's well-being, right? So for me, I think it was not necessarily being terrified of failing, but more like refusal to fail, right? And I think that, like, to be completely honest, like, I just learned to frame sort of as Julie was saying, like, every time I failed, I never framed it as like I lost, like I failed, but it was like, okay, this happened, but whatever, like that's in the past, like I learned this, and now I'm just gonna shift my focus and win at this, right? And I think that it was sort of being inspired by the chance of failure, right? Like when I ran for office, it was like, yeah, when I introduce myself and I tell people I'm 19 and running for office, like literally at debates, the whole audience would laugh, right? And so I knew failure was obviously there, but I think I've always been sort of inspired by it, right? Because I think that if there's a huge chance you're gonna fail, it means that you're doing something different. And it means you're doing something that you're gonna defy all the odds if you succeed at it, right? And to me, I think that's kind of exciting and thrilling. And yeah, I'm an adrenaline junkie, but like I sort of think of it in that same way. Like there's sort of a rush in startup culture because you know that if you lose to a certain extent, like that's it, right? But so I think that if you can use that to fuel yourself and you just keep going with it, like that's kind of where I think I take a lot of my persistence from.
Okay, I got a whole bunch more questions, but I want to open things up. Do folks want to weigh in? We got 2 mics here, I think, right? Do folks just want to come up to the mic if you have a question and just introduce yourself briefly, and we'll take a couple questions at a time and then let the panel go at them. Please.
All right, thank you so much, the panelists. My name is Seguya Hilary Innocent Taylor. I'm from Uganda, and I'm a graduate student at Harvard. I'm studying international relations. Today I had a conversation as I was coming to the World Bank headquarters with my Uber driver. He was telling me that before he got to Uber, he was working with McDonald's. So McDonald's brought the self-order machine, and he was laid off. He found himself in Uber. And he's telling me again, at the same time, Uber is also bringing self-driven cars, because he was tested in California, San Francisco. So he was telling me that very soon he's scared because he's gonna be laid off also. So he was like, where are we going? And when I hear Silicon Valley, I also get scared, because I'm like, you are the guys who are removing jobs for other people. Today, if you look at Bank of America, they've brought us Erica, artificial intelligence. Just say, Erica, what's my account balance? She tells you. You go to iPhone, they have Siri. You talk to Siri. Go to Google, same thing. If you look at Saudi Arabia, they have also a robot called Sophia. So with years to come, maybe in the UN General Assembly, we shall have Sophia debating global issues. So as a student who is doing international relations, I want to see myself work with the UN. Am I going to be debating with robots in the near future? Because countries like Saudi Arabia, they could bring a robot, and I could be discussing issues of North Korea with a robot. So where are we going as panelists? Then to Nadia, you work on a very sensitive issue of girls with hygiene products. I come from Africa, and to be specific, Uganda. Uganda has the second youngest population in the world today. But we have leaders who don't care about the girl child. If you look at the girl child in remote areas, mainly those who have single parents, mostly the fathers, some of them can't afford the cost of a sanitary pad. And that means that this child is going to miss out school like for a week each and every month. And that's not fair to the girl child. So how can we devise ways of producing reusable sanitary pads to developing countries, more so in my country or sub-Saharan Africa? Thank you so much.
Fabulous question. I think a robot would have a very hard time competing with that kind of a question in the village. I'll start with that. I want to take one more, that fabulous couple questions. I want to kind of put a pin in that, take one more question, then we'll let the panel go at them. Please.
Thank you. I'm Fatoumata Adel Bari. I'm from Niger. I'm a medical doctor candidate and author. So, Mr. Prince, I heard you mention Carol Dweck, and I would like to, you were talking about mindset, and I would like to share with the audience that there is an incredible and amazing book about growing mindset, about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growing mindset, and how to learn more, how our brain works and how we have to fix our issues in each area of our lives. The book's name is Grow Mindset by Carol Dweck, that each of us have to read. Thank you. And the second thing, Nadia, I would like to congratulate you for everything you've done. And I would like to know the title of the book you published, because I love books and I'm a writer, and thank you.
You want to take the title of the book real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Quick plug.
A shameless plug. My book is called Period Power, a Manifesto for the Menstrual Movement, and it is available wherever books are sold.
Great. Okay.
That's what they told me to say. I really don't know what it means, but that's I know that's the answer.
So the both questions kind of open up to the panel. Are we going to be debating, or is this going to be a panel of robots in 2 years' time? Kind of what's the future of work in that regard? And also maybe some concrete kind of what are the skill sets so that you actually are not going to be displaced by robots going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a shot. First of all, we are a long way away from robots replacing us. Robots today don't have common sense. Robots today don't understand reason. Robots today, AI today, is just simply recognizing patterns. Thousands and thousands and millions of patterns. Till we get to the point where they actually have some common sense and they have a worldview, then I'll be concerned. We're very far from that. However, your question's real. And your question, quite frankly, I worry about it from the standpoint of the anxiety that brings on today in society in general. I mean, the only thing we can fall back on from my perspective, we are incredibly optimistic that AI and robotics are going to augment human potential and not replace it. And that's been the case throughout history. You know, in New York City in 1905, there was 100,000 horses that were basically running that city, and there was an entire industry around that. 20 years later, there was basically no horses, but the automobile industry represented, a massive amount of new opportunity and jobs. For the skills of the future is the thing we have to focus on. This is not about jobs. This is a skills discussion. We get really, really fixated on jobs. Jobs are important. We all need jobs. Livelihood's important. But this is about acquiring the right skills. And do we have the platforms to give those people the skills that they need to be successful in a changing world? And that's the thing we have to really, really, really focus on. We're trying to do our best with that. We offer a tremendous amount of curriculum and content out there today. You can go tomorrow and get a data science degree from Microsoft, academy.microsoft.com. Go get a data science degree in 12 weeks. You can get a certification from Open edX. And we have 12 programs just like that, whether it be data visualization, data science, data engineering, computer science, productivity, so on and so forth. The skills are really the thing we have to focus on, because it's going to be a huge displacement of people that are going to need to change the way they work, hopefully not stop working. That's my hope.
Let me take the opposite view on that, Tony. A robot is going to take your job. And it is 100% okay. Actually, on the way over yesterday, I can show you on my phone. I walked past a burger joint, and in the burger joint was a massive robot arm flipping the burgers. There was a very unhappy-looking guy in there. When I had to go inside, I'm like, "Hey, how do you feel about this robot?" He was not happy about this. So I think AI is going to advance. I think the robots are coming. Self-driving cars is a great example. And I think we need to be completely okay with some jobs transitioning to automation. And I think the mindset is more that jobs are going to be transformed, right? And they're going to give us more free time to do the things that really matter. So what I think about every day is about the future of teaching, education. You mentioned edX, which is a great online platform that anyone can go on and take courses and learn about anything. So you know, in my world, I think about the replacement of you know, what requires a teacher. You know, Piper is essentially a robotic teacher. And so the beautiful thing is now anyone, regardless of where they are, if they're in Jamaica or in the US or wherever, or regardless of how much resources they have, they can access a resource to learn. You can log on to Khan Academy or Coursera or any of these online courses. This is sort of the replacement of some parts of teaching. And that's very exciting for me because it's giving more access, and I encourage that. And then I think the key thing for our expert teachers is to have that mindset of augmentation. I think we'll have many people that enter, they build their first computer, and then with great facilitation, with great teachers, that gets even more enriched. So rather than thinking about the robots taking our jobs, it's a coexistence, and I'd welcome both. They're going to take the jobs, and they're going to give us time to educate our youth, you know, more deeply with the combination. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, and I just wanted to chime in as another Silicon Valleyite. I mean, yes, it's happening. It's the same concern that coal miners had, right? You know, that coal mining is going away. Yep, I'm sorry, coal mining is going away. But, I mean, how do we get them the skills, and how do we design products? Silicon Valley companies, they care about markets. Everyone in the world is going to have a smartphone in a very short number of years. I think it's like 5 years or whatever. So the reason our program is successful, we sell into these Silicon Valley companies as a professional development opportunity because they want their employees to know human-centered design skills so that they go to countries like Uganda, know what the tech usage context is there so that they can design products that are going to help people in Uganda be more productive. So that is my hope for the future. Like, yes, it's coming, but how do we get them the skills, and how do we show Silicon Valley companies that it's in their interest to build products for those markets?
Well, I was just going to say this is very reassuring because I don't know anything about AI really, more than what I read like on Snapchat News, to be honest. And like I am of the camp that's very anxious by it and like very scared of it. So I just wanted to say this is really reassuring. And then can I answer the period question, or did you want to?
We can tag team it.
Okay, yeah, let's tag team it. So it's really hard, right? Because we have all of this research that shows how extreme the obstacle of a period is for girls continuing their education in school or even expanding in economic mobility, right? Like, it is the #1 reason why girls miss school, right? And I think that it's difficult even when you, like, it's not only about affording period products, but the matter of fact is we don't actually have a period product that exists that can reach girls who are in communities where there's no waste management system and no constant clean access to clean water, right? And so period, we have a few partners and girls we work with in Uganda, and like that's one of the things that they come up against is like first of all, it's hard for them to have a conversation with any people in leadership who are mostly men, right, about periods. But second of all, even when it's like, okay, we're down, what are the solutions? There's kind of confusion over it, right? Because it's not sustainable to ship any disposable period products abroad. It's not good in terms of like not having a waste management system and then the supply runs out. But also like even if we were to ship cloth pads over and everything like that, there's not access to clean water all the time to be able to use them and wash them and use them cleanly, right? So I think that you have to do it in tangent. One, fighting the issue and saying, we need to make this change. We need to talk about periods. Like this is an obstacle we need to care about. At the same time, working with, there are people in Silicon Valley, I know that's kind of a term we're throwing around, but like literally in Silicon Valley, who are working on technology around period products to create some sort of sustainable solution that is made from disposable like compostable materials, but also being able to have a reusable product that doesn't use water but can also be hygienic, right? But I also want to say, like, they have to go hand in hand, right? Because if we create a solution, we need to be able to have the conversation on operations of how we distribute that solution, right? At the same time, like, it is a big deal, even for someone in the US, from the US, to be male identifying and get up in front of an audience of hundreds of people and talk about periods, right? So I just want to give you a round of applause for, like, being that person, yeah. Because like realistically, like we still need that all over the world. Like we need like the single dads, and we need like the men who are like in power to be able to talk about periods and acknowledge like if we're going to talk about global development and breaking the cycle of poverty, how can we not be talking about making sure that 100% of the population is ready to reach their full potential, right? And periods are inherently part of that conversation, yet it's not something that's coming up in those rooms, right? So I think that even you as a leader in your own community, or being at Harvard and studying IR and being able to bring with you when you become someone who's in the UN talking about international issues, to be that guy who's going to stand up and say, periods matter, let's talk about it. Like, we need a solution to this, and I think that we need more men to be comfortable talking about it. Yeah.
Just very quickly, we don't have to go all the way to Silicon Valley to get these solutions, because girls themselves in Uganda already know the solution to combating periods in schools. And I've seen it from the programs that we've done where a group of girls pitched a product. They're like, we're going to make reusable sanitary products. And I was like, wonderful, because like, you know your community best. You are the best person to implement this. How can we support you? And that's what it really comes down to the end of the day, is elevating the local communities there.
Two quick points there too. I think there is kind of this mistaken theory that kind of Silicon Valley is a place you have to go to be able to kind of be an entrepreneur, and I think that is not at all the case. I think the panel would probably fully agree with that. And kind of there is a trend of kind of entrepreneurial incubators and shared workspaces happening all over the globe, and I think that's something that's really exciting. So the answers are there in Uganda, in Iraq, they just launched a new working space in Baghdad. I mean, I think we're seeing that anywhere around the globe that we look. And secondly, I would hope that some of you all also are thinking about taking that plunge at some point into that political space, and that we might touch on that a little bit too down the road, about the trend of entrepreneurs actually who are trying to affect change in their community, maybe getting frustrated with the lack of progress and deciding, hey, I really have to enter into the arena, and the political process is nasty and difficult, especially for women. US, 19% of our elected officials in Congress, as Nadia rightly mentioned, are female. It's higher in this new Congress that's coming, about 25%, but still we're 97th in the world. Young people below the age of 40, average age of a member of parliament globally, anyone know? 51 years old. Average age of kind of when you can run globally, 30. Big campaign, they try to lower the age to 18, not too young to run, but there's a whole exciting kind of movement globally happening around trying to get more young people from a variety of backgrounds to enter into the political process. Sorry, next few questions. That's an exciting area, I think, that further discussion could be had.
Absolutely, that was a good point. My name is Joshua Ebin. I'm originally from Nigeria, but I went to school at Texas A&M, currently an engineer in the energy industry in Houston, Texas. I have a question about how do you, from your experience, this is an open question, how do you go about developing a business model that actually gives you a win-win value creating proposition? So to where you impact the environment positively, but you also make some kind of profit, especially in developing countries where access to resources is really tough, and people naturally are not even interested in like any progressive ideas in some parts of the region. And secondly, how do you, from your experience, how do you go about formulating risk assessments to where you can really see what might work and what will definitely not work? And lastly, how do you inspire people, to get behind an idea, especially when you've done your due diligence and you know that this is the way I want to take this product or this service? Thank you.
Good questions. We're going to take a couple more, and then we'll take them all as a group. Please.
My name is Shamaila Fatima. I am a Master's of International Affairs candidate at the Pennsylvania State University. My question for you is, what is your advice for entrepreneurs who are trying to execute programs on topics such as periods or girls in the sports field, or even promote co-educational dialogue in places where these things are not only embarrassing, but they are a taboo and can get you in trouble? And mostly if you're trying to involve male participation in it.
Great question. One more, we'll take one more and then we'll throw it.
Hi, my name is Danny. I work for the OECD Washington office just around the corner. I have a question for Tony, but it's also for the panel. Tony, you mentioned that 65% of schools, I think in America, aren't teaching STEM, and it brought me back to a conversation I had with a colleague where I was saying, high school students, when they leave, they should have basic coding skills. They should have, we've talked a lot about entrepreneurship today, financial literacy as well. Do they know how to open a bank account, get a good credit score? Do they know how to request loans and not go off the rails with that? And he looked at me and he said, Danny, I agree with you 100%. I could not agree more. But he said, Danny, my wife is a teacher, and there are days and weeks where she has to bring in her own toilet paper because the school can't afford it. And while it's fantastic that we are talking about teaching STEM and coding and financial literacy, there are schools in disadvantaged areas around the world who just don't have the capacity to do so. So my question to you and to everyone is, what role could government, civil society, even the private sector? I think Microsoft and tech companies are not the only, but they're one of the biggest losers in this because they're missing out on talent. They're not hiring people with the right skills. So my question is, what role beyond government do other stakeholders have in sort of bridging that gap from going from delivering toilet paper, sanitary products, whether it's tampons and heating and so on, to teaching STEM? Thanks.
Great, thanks, Danny. I'm gonna take one more question because I want to get through everybody before we close out the session. So I'm gonna cap the line, and then we'll do one more with this group, and then take one more round, please.
Hi, my name's Raha. Sorry, I'm short. My name is Raha. I'm currently a public health student at Boston University. I just have two quick questions. So my first question is, as tech leaders, how do you incorporate the arts into the field? For example, we have a movement of not just STEM, but also STEAM, incorporating the arts and also social sciences, such as sociology and also anthropology. And my second question is, especially those who are in nonprofits and startups, how do you use technology and social media to maximize storytelling? Because let's be real, I am volunteering with, and I did my practicum at a mobile health clinic. It's a nonprofit, and funding is definitely a big issue, and trying to tell our story and get funders to donate. So how do you do that using technology and social media? Thank you.
Awesome, great set of questions. We're gonna try to keep answers pretty short so we can get one more round in, but issues around win-win, taboo places, challenges, issues of kind of education space and not having enough resources, STEM, STEAM, the arts, social media, how do we utilize some of these new platforms? Who wants to start? Julie?
I want to talk about the first question. How do you find the win-win? Rapid prototyping is my answer for you. We spend so much time trying to cook up the solution and create the business plan and blah, blah, blah. Just get out there and try it. I would really encourage you to look at IDEO.org. I know that the gentleman talking about Kidogo this morning used them to study his problem statement. I've worked with them some. It's amazing the rapid prototyping they do. They go out and they test market a product they don't even have yet. I'm like, how is that legal? You're set up a little pop-up stand and they're trying to sell this, water purification chemical that they don't even have and can't deliver. But check out their case studies, and I would just say push yourself on that side. As soon as you have an idea, test it as soon as you can and iterate.
Yeah, I'll second that plug for the IDEO.org and design thinking in general. I think that's what sort of took me from being an engineer to being an entrepreneur was human-centered design thinking, innovate, whatever you want to call it. It's sort of paying attention to the problem, having empathy. So I think, especially for these problems where there's a sensitivity, I think solving these difficult problems requires empathy. And then there's a theme in in some of these questions around resources, hey, what if I'm in this place and I don't have the resources for that? I think that's where rapid prototyping comes in. For my previous company, we made really affordable prosthetics for developing world, for India especially. And we just made our first prototypes out of cardboard. That's what we had available. And I think, with Piper, we had wood lying around. That's why it's made out of wood, because that's literally what we had in our basement. We got the hacksaws and then put that in front of people, tested it the next day, and we got such positive feedback that it sort of ballooned from there. In fact, our prototypes look very similar to this. So I'd definitely want to plug for looking into design thinking and innovation process, especially the pieces where you're paying attention to the problem you're solving, having empathy, and then having a mindset of rapid prototyping, testing that day, use what you have. Regardless of your resources, you can still solve a lot of problems with very limited resources, and that's been my experience in all the companies I've been involved with.
On the last two questions, the question on STEM and STEAM, the program that we do is called Women and Girls STEAM Camp, because we recognize that the arts and design does have an intersection with all the different STEM subjects. And I think the sooner that we can train girls and youth to think about it that way, that all these subjects intersect with each other, I think the stronger the human capital that we can have for everybody. And on the second question on like using social media and storytelling, that is literally everything that Girl Up does. We use social media as our biggest tool for storytelling, meaning like who are the girls that we're impacting across the world? Who are the girls that are being, the leaders of their communities here? So if you look at any of our social media handles, like you're always going to see a girl there. And we have what we call Girl Up Instagram takeovers, where it's girls telling the stories themselves. So I think, one, we definitely have to let youth tell their own stories. But we, as adults, we have to give them that platform and help them get there. And the second thing that I really want to say is that sometimes you'll find the most creative ideas for storytelling from youth themselves. They just need that opportunity.
Okay. On the question about taboo in like places where it might not be safe to talk about it, like that is a very, very real concern. And I would say that like I personally don't know what that's like because I mean the repercussions of talking about periods aren't that drastic in the US. But I would say like it's really important to have allies, right? And I think that before I ever started talking about periods, I found a co-founder that was a guy, right? And like I knew that I needed a guy co-founder because like if someone wasn't gonna talk to me about it, like I needed them to have another perspective, right? And so I think that if that is a concern for you, like look at your inner circles of like who are allies that might also be passionate about it. Find someone like this gentleman right here from like Uganda who like will stand up and talk about periods, right? But like I think that I have faith that those people exist, and if you want to build a team before you take action, that's really big. Okay, social media. This is like my favorite thing to talk about. So social media, like yes, absolutely to everything Rocio said of like storytelling, the power of storytelling on it, but I think it's first important just to acknowledge social media as a tool, right? When I started my nonprofit, when I started Period, I didn't think it was going to be a nonprofit. I didn't expect it to expand beyond like my 1 mile radius of where I lived, right? Like I had one goal of getting 20 packages of period products to the 20 homeless women I could name by name because they were like my friends. I get them period products every week, right? But naturally, as Gen Z, like it was natural for me to like every time I did something like got products at the store, put them together with my friends, I was putting it on Instagram and putting it on Facebook, not even to invite people to get involved, but just to say, I'm doing this, right? And within a matter of months, we were getting messages all over the country from students, but also journalists asking how to get involved or the fact that they had never thought about it before. Fast forward, we just celebrated our 4-year anniversary 2 days ago. Period is now the largest youth-run NGO in women's health in the world and the fastest growing nonprofit run by someone under 30 in the United States. And it all started accidentally, thank you. It all started accidentally on social media, right? It started by us saying, I had no money, my family had no money, we were coming out of not having a home ourselves, but what I had was a phone, right? Because like, if we had limited resources, my mom was paying for a phone plan so that she could reach us when she wasn't with us, and for like food and house, right? But what I had was social media because it was like a free tool that I had, and all of the people we started recruiting to be chapter leaders were, for the most part, low-income girls around the country who said, this is something I've never felt empowered to talk about, right? And we all came across social media, right? Now in my work with Juve Consulting, we work with companies as large as a Nike and Adidas all the way down to small startups by young people. And when we're with young people, we're like, okay, you have $0 budget, but you guys all have Instagram accounts and you all spend exorbitant amounts of time on Instagram and Facebook. Like, what can we do in terms of that, right? Or we work at the higher levels of larger corporations who are saying, what we're doing on Facebook isn't working anymore because your main consumers are aging out of other platforms, right? So what can we do to help align your messaging and create content that's specific for this social media platform? So I think that for startups, it's a very easy way to powerfully have storytelling incorporated in a way that's accessible for a lot of people.
I'll really quickly take a shot at Danny's question, which absolutely, unquestionably, one of the barriers to getting broader adoption of STEM is the cost, unquestionably. And it's hard. There is no easy answer. And it does require coalitions across governments and industries and NGOs and nonprofits and others. I'm hopeful. I've seen really good examples where actually systems are embracing cloud technology to save tremendous amounts of money and then put that money back into new technology. First of all, we offer almost all our technology, not all of it, but most of our technology to free to any school that wants it. So you can get our core Office 365 platform, you can get core Windows-like products for virtually no cost at all or no cost. We have examples of working with school systems, large school systems around the world. I'll give an example in Brazil, where we've moved their entire infrastructure to the cloud. And they have three major costs. 99% of the budget of the Sao Paulo school system is payroll, food, and transportation. They're using the cloud to save about 25% on two of those, transportation and food, because they found ways to actually optimize the delivery of those two things by using smart technology and getting out of the old manual ways of doing things. And they're taking that savings and they're putting it into technology. And technology does not have to be devices. Too many projects around the world are, let's buy everyone a device. It's, you know, one device, two votes type of thing, right? And it really can be smart uses of training teachers, getting the foundation in place, getting the analytics straight, and getting the data platform and the data estate together in such a way that you can then make smart decisions going forward for your students and for your teachers. But you've absolutely identified one of the hardest areas. I see hope, I see good examples out there, and I see good governments working with industry and NGOs and others to get the money that they need, but it does become a priority.
But super quick on that also, the maker mindset does not require, you know, complicated hardware. Kind of like Joel was saying, like start with what you have. We're working in 13 developing countries. There's a program called Toys from Trash where you know, just use what you have around. Another program called Strawbees where you just, you know, build things out of straws. And there's a lot of resources out there where you can at least begin that creative problem solving mindset, and you don't need complicated hardware for that.
Yeah, and it may even be better to start out that way without that investment. Just a plug on the government thing, you know, one thing I would love is, you know, we realize that physical stuff, it costs money. And, you know, I'd like, as a standard, every child who graduates high school, you know, reading, math, and that they can build a computer, because that's what we think is the fundamental skill set that's going to lead into the jobs of the future. So if we're going to do that, that's going to cost money, and we're going to need the government to fund that and help us like set the standards and help us like, you know, pay for the materials that ultimately need to go there. So if there's anyone in the crowd who's interested in helping fund that wave, send me a note.
Awesome, great. Okay, we have about 4.5 minutes. We got 3 more questions, and then I want to give the panelists a chance to give closing thoughts and advice. So please.
Thank you. My name is Lydia Perliani. I'm from Webster University. My question is like, now we live in the workplace, there's like a 4th generation, which is like baby boomer, Generation X, Y, and Z. And because of the technology now is improvement, and it's like a lot of job who there's like need more skill. And usually we know that like baby boomer or maybe some Generation X is the generation who are like very difficult to change. And when it comes to the young generation like Y and Z, they are good, but people say for like the Generation X mostly say that they don't like us because of we don't have attitude, you don't know our culture, like you just want to do whatever you want to do, even you have the technology. And how you feel the gap of like, we need the skill, but the Generation X or Generation Baby Boomer don't have it, but the Generation Y and Z, they think that they don't have the attitude. So how you want to fill the gap? Thank you.
Great question, great first question. I'm gonna take the other 2 as well, and then we'll throw it back to the panel.
Hi, my name is Mike Harris. I grew up around here, but I go to school in Chicago. I recently started my own global feminist social platform as well, and you touched on social media. All of you kind of touched on social media, and we all know how to work Instagram. We all know how to post stories, but how do you build that follower base? That was my question.
Great question too.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ati. I'm from South Africa, but I'm currently doing my master's in actuarial science in Scotland. So I have a maths app, which is called Sigma X, which is now available on Apple as well as Android store. The purpose of the app is to help learners to improve their pass grades so that they're able to get into the STEM careers such as engineering and tech. But now my question is, how do you assist companies that are obviously in Africa? Like, what advice do you have that want to scale? Because we already have revenue coming in, we already have a set number of users, but then our problem is scaling. Because one, our venture capital markets are not as mature as developed countries, and secondly, we would have hoped that the government, would help us. But the thing is, like, in terms of their decision making, the opportunity cost of either investing in tech or maybe building a school, so they have to make those decisions. So that's one. And the other one is, how do you, as big businesses, such as Microsoft, work with local communities? Because as she was saying, is that sometimes entrepreneurs on the ground have ideas, but then we get a lot of these multinational companies that come and they dump their product. So sometimes they're used, sometimes they're relevant, and other times, and a lot of the times, they're actually not. And they sometimes actually cause a lot of conflict, or there's a lot of issues. So how do you then monitor or maybe work with people on the ground and locally in those countries in order to help them grow?
Great.
Yeah.
Great set question. So I'm going to try to keep answers pretty tight so we can get just a quick round of last advice. But questions about intergenerational engagement, me generation versus kind of a generation of the past, or whatever you want to call it, kind of the challenges there. Social media followers, how do you build that following and movement behind you? Scalable companies, Africa, Middle East, elsewhere around the world, how do you kind of make that work scale a company?
Let me just make a quick plug on that last question. Very tough question about how to deal with the system if the government in your country isn't on board. I think you got to have a mindset as an entrepreneur to circumvent the system. For us with Piper, very few hardware edtech companies succeed, and that's because they go directly to schools. They try and work with government or with districts, and that's too slow. We circumvented that by getting directly to parents in the beginning. That's what fed our business, and now we're kind of getting back around because sneakily to transform the system. So I think mindset of being a rebel, work with what you have, go around the obstacles. It helped that we posted a lot of stuff to social media. So on that note, start with Piper. My favorite thing with social media is actually listening to our customers and seeing, thousands of kids build their own computers. That's what gets me going in the morning.
I just wanted to hit on that first question. What I love about millennials and Generation Z, the research shows they care about two things. One is authentic purpose in their work. They don't want to just go make widgets all day. So bringing your full self, implementing a genuine sense of purpose. The second is personal and professional development. Those are good things to have. I would say, keep going, be difficult on those things, because that's going to force your companies to be better and move in the right direction. So don't apologize for that.
I'll go very quickly. Girl Up produced a Gen Z report, and I was like, wonderful. We're finally asking girls what they think. And I think that's a great way to start in terms of that intergenerational thing. As a young person, yes, it's hard to get that adult in the room to listen to you, but the more persistent you are, the more you find out how much of an entrepreneur you really are. So the two really go in together. And on the question how to build up a follower base, I just keep coming back to the theme of girls and women supporting each other. So share what your handle is, and one of us will share it on our social medias. Share it with everybody here, and you'll see how big it'll grow by just sharing more about your story.
Sort of on the note of intergenerational work, I think that's especially as a young entrepreneur is what you need, because at the end of the day, the people who are holding on to the money, both as clients or investors, are usually decades older than you, right? So I think that the intergenerational work comes from both sides. One, it's showing that you put in the work and that you can build the credibility to do what you're saying, right? And getting them to respect your experience. But also I think that I look at a lot of my peers and realize they don't have a lot of experience for people who are Gen Xers or baby boomers, right? Because there's this sort of what do they know? They're so much older than us, right? And I think that there's this sort of need for respect going both ways. And I think that that's why I'm a big fan of mentorship, both to young people who are older and older people who are to younger. And then on the note about social media, scaling, I would say just the same thing. It's share it with all your friends, get everyone you know to share it, and then tactfully, you can allocate your dollars to use media buying on social media, but also work with influencers and brands, right? The way Period grew our social media, or how I've grown my social media base, or now a lot of my income transparently is from being an influencer on Instagram, right? So I think being able to, strategically use social media to work with influencers and partner with brands and get every other big brand to tag you in all their posts is a really easy way to scale your audience.
Last closing comments or pieces of advice you want to share?
I would say please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm sure that everyone else sitting up here would be open to reaching out. Reach out if you have questions. My Instagram is @NadiaOkamoto. I will respond to anyone who reaches out. So please, if you have questions, or if I can support, or if I can share what you're doing, please don't feel free to reach out.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is, and I know the name of the session is Leveraging Technology, but really do start with your non-technical skills first. I think that starting with empathy, decision-making, collaboration, understanding really, what each other needs from each other to be successful is really where you should start. Build the foundation in your mindset, build the foundation in your non-technical skills, build your competencies, then leverage the technology.
Awesome. I'll just close with one point. Does anyone know the number one fear of people around the world? Public speaking. So the storytelling piece, which I think is essential, whether it's social media, in person, pitching, you name it. I think one of the most powerful things that I think everyone in this room has is probably an incredibly powerful personal story. You heard about authenticity. You heard about kind of the power of bringing your personal story to your business or to your social cause. I think spending some time thinking about that and then being willing to wrestle with the challenges of kind of being up in front of people as a speaker, I think are skill sets that also, in addition to the technical pieces, are things all of us can continue to work with. So real quick, I want to give the big round of applause to the panel, fabulous group. I also want to give a big round of applause to the folks who asked questions. Those are fabulous groups of questions. And I think we had more women ask questions than men, which is also a powerful thing too. So thank you guys.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Careful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. So let's thank Andy and our panelists one more time. Great big round of applause for that great discussion. Woo! The afternoon continues on. I promised long days. I promised 10 hours. Maybe we'll go longer. I don't know. We'll see. But this is exactly what it is. It's a strong learning opportunity. So can everyone please stand up? Stand up. Stand up. Yes, there it is. Doesn't it feel so good? Yes, you're stretching without me even saying it. Please lead the stretch. Everyone, follow her. Go ahead, stretch up. There we go, just like that. Wave your hands just like her. Feels good when you do that too. Awesome, I love it. This is a full-on, you just did like the lunge, and wow, that's a commitment to stretching. Awesome, feels good though, right? All right, great. So we are about to enter our final workshop session of the afternoon. And then tomorrow, I promise, we'll have one more. So you know how this goes. We've already been iterating on our process because, as you saw in the first session, it was a little chaotic, but we're going to make it even better this time. So for those of you who are watching in the overflow room, so I'm looking at you because I'm looking at the camera, please stay in there until we call your bracelet color. And then at that point, you are going to come out here and join us when you're being called in. So keep that in mind. All right. So while I have all of you still standing, so let's see here. Where is my sheet with the colors? I don't know where my organizers. Where is my sheet with the colors? Let's see. I have lost my organizers. High five each other. Introduce yourself to someone that you have not met yet, and I will get you the colors.
Everybody, please stay standing and stay where you are so we're able to facilitate the process. Please do not exit on either side until everybody has gone to their workshops.
Who is